Hey story enthusiasts! This is Monkey DFIC bringing you another gem. In this video, we present to you what if Luffy was trained by all three admirals. If you enjoy these stories as much as we enjoy sharing them, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Let's dive in. Chapter 1, Ice, Magma, and Light. The sun beat down on Marine headquarters as 10-year-old Monkey D. Luffy stood at the massive gates, clutching his straw hat against his chest. His grandfather's hand felt like a vice on his shoulder. "I don't want to be here, Grandpa." Luffy tried to dig his heels into the ground, but Garp dragged him forward effortlessly. "Enough. This is happening, Luffy." Garp's voice softened just a fraction. "That red-haired pirate filled your head with nonsense. Now look at you, some devil fruit user who can't even swim. If I leave you in that village, you'll be sailing off with the next pirate crew that docks." Luffy's bottom lip quivered, but he set his jaw stubbornly. "So what? I'm gonna be king of the pirates anyway." Garp stopped cold, turning to face his grandson with a thunderous expression. Several passing Marines quickened their pace, avoiding the infamous Garp's notorious fist of love. "That's exactly why you're here." Garp knelt to eye level with Luffy. "Listen to me. The path you're dreaming of leads to execution. I've seen too many promising young fools die chasing that dream. But Shanks, enough about Shanks." Garp's voice echoed across the courtyard. He took a deep breath. "Luffy, I've pulled every string I have. The Fleet Admiral himself has approved something unprecedented. You're going to train directly under the three admirals." Luffy's eyes widened. "The scary guys in the funny suits?" Despite everything, Garp laughed. "Those scary guys are the most powerful fighters in the Marines. If anyone can beat that pirate nonsense out of you and turn you into something extraordinary, it's them. I don't care how strong they are." Luffy crossed his arms, his rubber limbs twisting slightly too far in his agitation. "I'm not becoming a boring Marine." Garp sighed, then straightened up. "Come on. They're waiting." Fleet Admiral Sengoku's office felt too small with three admirals standing at attention. Luffy peeked around his grandfather's leg, studying each man with undisguised curiosity despite his anger. Sengoku stroked his beard, eyeing the small boy with the straw hat. "Garp, this is highly irregular." "I know what I'm asking," Garp replied. "But the boy's potential is off the charts. And if we don't harness it now, we'll be hunting him down in a decade." The tallest admiral yawned loudly, stretching his arms. "Teaching some brat? Sounds like a pain." "Shut it, Kuzan," snapped the broad-shouldered admiral with the cap. "Vice Admiral Garp wouldn't waste our time without reason." The third admiral adjusted his yellow-striped suit with an enigmatic smile. "Oh. Training the grandson of the hero? How very interesting." Luffy stepped forward suddenly, pointing at each admiral in turn. "Who are you guys anyway?" Sengoku's eyebrow twitched, but before he could speak, Garp roared with laughter. "This is Admiral Akiji," Garp pointed to the lazy-looking tall man. Admiral Akainu, the stern man with the cap, nodded curtly. And Admiral Kizaru, the yellow-suited man, waggled his fingers in greeting. Luffy tilted his head. "You guys don't look that tough." The temperature in the room plummeted as frost crept across the floor from Akiji's feet. Simultaneously, Akainu's shoulders began to smolder, and the light around Kizaru bent strangely. "Enough." Sengoku's voice cut through the tension. "The boy doesn't understand what he's saying." "I understand fine." Luffy shouted. "I ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi. I'm a rubber man. See?" He grabbed his cheek and stretched it to an impossible length. The three admirals exchanged glances. "Paramecia," Akainu said flatly. "Potentially useful with the right discipline." "Interesting ability," Kizaru mused, suddenly appearing beside Luffy in a flash of light, tugging at the boy's outstretched cheek. "Very stretchable indeed." Luffy slapped his hand away. Don't touch my face, weirdo. Akiji snorted with sudden laughter. The kid's got spirit. Sengoku cleared his throat. It's decided then. Each admiral will take responsibility for different aspects of the boys' training. Akainu, you'll handle combat and offensive capabilities. Akiji, defensive techniques and strategic thinking. Kizaru, speed and reflexes. And discipline, Akainu added, staring down at Luffy. The boy clearly needs it. Luffy met his gaze without flinching. I don't need anything from you. Garp's hand came down on Luffy's head, forcing him into a bow. He'll learn respect. Won't you, Luffy? Luffy remained silent, his straw hat shadowing his eyes. This arrangement will continue until the boy is ready to enter service properly, Sengoku concluded. Dismissed. As they left the office, Garp knelt beside Luffy once more. This is your chance, Luffy. These men can make you stronger than you can imagine. I don't care, Luffy muttered, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of interest at the word stronger. Garp saw it and smiled. I have to leave on a mission. Behave yourself. He ruffled Luffy's hair and walked away. Luffy watched his grandfather's broad back disappear, suddenly feeling very small amid the towering marine headquarters. Well then, little rubber boy, Kizaru's voice made him jump. Shall we begin? The first month was hell. Akainu's training began at dawn each day. While other recruits ran laps around the base, Luffy dodged magma balls that left smoking craters in the training ground. Faster. Akainu barked as a glob of magma singed the edge of Luffy's shorts. A pirate wouldn't hesitate to kill you. I told you, Luffy gasped between dodges, I'm gonna be a pirate. A magma fist slammed into the ground inches from his feet, sending him tumbling backward. Not if I have anything to say about it, Akainu growled. Again. By mid-morning, exhausted and covered in minor burns, Luffy would stagger to Akiji's training area. Unlike Akainu's brutal approach, Akiji's session started with Luffy sitting quietly, eyes closed. Listen to everything around you, Akiji instructed, lying on his back with his sleep mask pushed up on his forehead. Feel the air change before an attack comes. This is boring, Luffy complained. When do I get to punch stuff? When you can dodge this. Without warning, Akiji flicked a finger, sending an ice shard hurtling toward Luffy's shoulder. Ow! Luffy yelped as it struck him. No fair. I wasn't ready. Enemies won't announce themselves, Akiji said lazily. We'll sit here every day until you sense it coming. Afternoons belonged to Kizaru, whose training methods were as unpredictable as the man himself. Sometimes he'd appear in flashes of light from different directions, expecting Luffy to track his movements. Other days, he'd have Luffy try to catch objects moving at increasing speeds. Too slow, Kizaru would sing-song as Luffy failed again and again. Light is the fastest thing in the world. You'll never catch me, but perhaps you can learn to see me coming, Evenings were spent in remedial classes on navigation, world history, and marine regulations. Luffy struggled to stay awake, his mind too active for books and his body too exhausted for anything else. At night, he'd collapse into his small bunk in the recruits' quarters, clutching his straw hat and thinking of Shanks, of Makino, of the freedom of the sea that seemed farther away with each passing day. 3 months in, something changed. During Akainu's morning bombardment, Luffy stopped running. What are you doing, boy? Akainu demanded as a magma ball hurtled toward Luffy's stationary form. At the last possible second, Luffy's body bent backwards at an impossible angle, the magma sailing over him. I'm tired of running, Luffy declared, straightening up. If I'm gonna get stronger, I need to fight back. Akainu's perpetual scowl deepened. With what? Your rubber punches can't touch me. Luffy grinned and charged forward. Gomu Gomu no pistol. His arms stretched back and then rocketed forward, directly at Akainu's face. The Admiral didn't bother dodging. The fist connected with his magma body and immediately began to burn. Ah, hot, hot, hot. Luffy yanked his hand back, blowing on his reddened knuckles. Idiot. Magma melts everything. Akainu crossed his arms. But at least you finally showed some initiative. Again, but this time think before you act. By the time Luffy limped to Akiji's session, he was nursing several more burns. Let me guess, Akiji said without opening his eyes. You tried to hit Sakazuki. Luffy plopped down cross-legged. How'd you know? Because you're predictable. Akiji sat up, regarding Luffy thoughtfully. Did you learn anything from getting burned? Luffy frowned. That I need stronger punches. Akiji sighed. No. That some enemies can't be defeated through direct attacks. You need to find another way. For once, Luffy didn't argue. He closed his eyes as instructed, focusing on the sounds around him. Minutes passed in silence. Then Akiji flicked an ice shard. Luffy tilted his head slightly, the projectile whizzing past his ear. Akiji raised an eyebrow. Again. By the time Kizaru's training arrived, word had spread about Luffy's small victories. The Admiral appeared beside him in a flash of light. I hear you're making progress with the grumps. Kizaru's smile was unreadable as always. Let's see if you can keep up today. Instead of the usual exercises, Kizaru led Luffy to the mess hall. We're eating. Luffy perked up immediately. Not quite. Kizaru pointed to a table where a marine sat alone with a chessboard. That's Lieutenant Commander Drake. Beat him, and you can have the rest of the afternoon off. Luffy's face fell. I don't know how to play chess. Precisely the point. Kizaru pushed him forward. Sometimes, speed isn't about how fast your body moves, but how quickly your mind adapts. For games later, Luffy had yet to capture a single piece. His frustration mounted with each defeat. This is stupid. He finally exploded, knocking over his king. I'm never gonna beat him. Drake gathered the pieces calmly. The Admiral said you don't quit. I don't. Luffy protested. But this isn't fighting. Everything is fighting, Drake replied. You just don't see the battlefield yet. Something in those words stuck with Luffy. He grudgingly sat down for another game, watching Drake's moves more carefully. By the 8th game, he took one of Drake's pawns. By the 12th, he had the lieutenant commander on the defensive. When Kizaru returned hours later, he found Luffy grinning triumphantly over a checkmate while Drake stared at the board in disbelief. My, Kizaru drawled. Seems our little rubber boy has hidden depths. 6 months into his training, Luffy's days fell into a rhythm. The burns from Akainu's sessions became fewer. Akiji rarely landed his ice projectiles anymore. And Kizaru actually had to try when testing Luffy's reflexes. It was during a rare joint training session that Luffy first combined what he'd learned from each Admiral. The 3 Admirals stood at different points around the training ground, creating a triangle with Luffy at the center. Survive 5 minutes, Akainu instructed. No restrictions. Before Luffy could reply, the ground beneath him turned to magma. He leapt high into the air, only to see Kizaru appearing above him, leg extended in a light kick. Twisting his rubber body, Luffy narrowly avoided the blow, only to plummet toward a field of ice spikes Akiji had created. Crap. Luffy stretched his arms to grab a nearby training post, yanking himself away from the ice. He landed in a crouch, eyes darting between the 3 Admirals. Akainu launched a volley of magma fists from his position. Instead of running, Luffy closed his eyes for a split second, feeling the air currents as Akiji had taught him. Then he moved, not in panic, but with purpose, slipping between the projectiles with a fluidity that surprised even Kizaru. The boy's learning, the Yellow Admiral commented, appearing behind Luffy in a flash. But Luffy had anticipated this, recalling the pattern from their chess matches. He ducked the light kick and countered with a rubber punch that, while easily avoided, forced Kizaru to reposition. For 4 minutes, Luffy evaded and countered, combining Akiji's awareness, Kizaru's unpredictability, and the relentless aggression Akainu had drilled into him. With 30 seconds remaining, all 3 admirals attacked simultaneously. Ice, magma, and light converged on Luffy's position. He took a deep breath, then jumped straight up, twisting his body into a corkscrew. The attacks collided below him, creating a spectacular explosion of steam and energy. As the cloud dissipated, Luffy landed on one knee in the center of the crater, singed and bruised but grinning wildly. 5 minutes, Akiji announced. Akainu grunted something that might have been approval. Kizaru slow-clapped with an amused expression. And Luffy realized he was enjoying himself. The realization troubled him that night as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the barracks. Had he forgotten his dream? Shanks had entrusted him with his hat, believing in Luffy's promise to become a great pirate. Yet here he was, training with Marines, getting stronger under their guidance. Using their techniques. Following their rules. He pressed the straw hat to his chest. I haven't forgotten, he whispered to himself. I'm just getting stronger. Then I'll leave, and they won't be able to stop me. A snore from the next bunk broke his reverie. The other recruits gave Luffy a wide berth, partly from jealousy over his special training, partly from fear after seeing what he could do. He had no friends here, not like Makino or the villagers of Fusha. The loneliness hit him suddenly. He turned on his side, pulling the hat over his eyes to hide the tears. I'll show them all, he promised himself. I'll become stronger than any of them expect. And then I'll be free. 3 years passed in this manner. Luffy grew from a scrawny 10-year-old into a lanky 13-year-old with increasingly impressive abilities. His rubber powers developed in ways no one had predicted. Under Akainu's harsh tutelage, he learned to withstand extreme temperatures, his body adapting to conditions that would kill ordinary humans. From Akiji, he mastered the art of observation, developing reflexes that bordered on precognition. And Kizaru's unpredictable training made Luffy's movements blindingly fast, his rubber limbs striking with precision and returning before opponents could react. The Admirals, initially dismissive of Garp's experiment, found themselves genuinely engaged in Luffy's development. Each saw in him the potential for their own brand of justice. Akainu watched Luffy pulverize a training dummy with rapid-fire punches, nodding in approval. The boy has embraced the necessity of absolute strength. Akiji observed Luffy evading a blindfolded assault from multiple marine instructors, recognizing the strategic mind developing behind the youngster's carefree demeanor. He sees more than most veterans. Kizaru tested Luffy's speed against his own light movements, surprised when the boy occasionally anticipated where he would appear. Such interesting potential, yet none of them fully understood the internal conflict raging within their student. Luffy performed every task, completed every mission, followed every order, but never relinquished his straw hat, and never abandoned his private dream. The breaking point came during Luffy's first field mission. A group of pirates had established a base on a small island within striking distance of several marine-protected territories. Normally, such a threat would warrant a full squad, but Sengoku approved a test of Luffy's capabilities. The barbed pirates, Akainu briefed him aboard the marine vessel. 23 members, Captain has a bounty of 15 million berries. They've raided 3 villages in the past month. Luffy nodded, adjusting the standard-issue marine cap that sat awkwardly over his treasured straw hat. Why are we going after them? They're pirates, Akainu responded flatly. That's reason enough. Luffy frowned but said nothing. At 13, he'd learned when to keep his questions to himself around Akainu. The island came into view as dawn broke. A small encampment was visible on the beach, the pirates, still sleeping off the previous night's celebration. Your orders are simple, Akainu said. Capture the captain, eliminate any who resist. Demonstrate what you've learned. Luffy stepped to the railing. What if they surrender? Pirates don't deserve mercy, Akainu replied coldly. But if they surrender unconditionally, they may be taken prisoner. With a nod, Luffy leapt from the ship, his body stretching and rebounding to carry him all the way to shore. He landed silently on the beach, surveying the pirate camp with the tactical eye Aokiji had helped him develop. 23 pirates, most asleep. 3 guards, barely awake. The captain would be in the largest tent at the center. Standard formation. Luffy moved like shadow and struck like lightning. The first guard didn't even see him coming, a rubber fist rendered him unconscious before he could shout a warning. The second and third fell just as quickly, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. The noise roused the camp. Pirates stumbled from tents, grabbing weapons, and blinking in the early morning light. What the hell? It's just a kid. He's wearing a marine cap. Get him. Luffy stood calmly as they charged. 3 years of dodging magma, ice, and light attacks had made these pirates seem to move in slow motion. Gomu Gomu no Gatling. His arms became a blur, rubber fists pummeling half a dozen pirates simultaneously. Bodies flew in all directions, crashing through tents and into trees. A burly man with a spiked club emerged from the central tent. What's going on here? Who dares attack Captain Barbed Miles? Luffy turned toward him. Monkey D. Luffy, Marine Headquarters. You're under arrest. The captain laughed uproariously. A child marine? They must be desperate. He charged, club raised high. Luffy didn't move until the last second. Then, remembering Kizaru's lessons, he stepped slightly to the side and extended one leg in the captain's path. The simple trip sent the captain sprawling face first into the sand. Before he could recover, Luffy planted a foot on his back. Stay down. It's over. Like hell it is. The captain twisted, producing a hidden pistol and firing point blank at Luffy's chest. The bullet stretched Luffy's rubber body before rebounding harmlessly. That won't work on me. Fear replaced bravado in the captain's eyes. What are you? I told you, Luffy replied, I'm a marine. The words felt strange in his mouth, but there was no denying the truth of that moment. Here he was, fighting pirates just as Gramps had always wanted. Within minutes, the entire crew was subdued. Luffy signaled the marine ship, and troops came ashore to secure the prisoners. Akainu approached as the captives were loaded onto the ship. Efficient work. You've learned well. They weren't very strong, Luffy said with a shrug. Most pirates aren't, Akainu replied. They're parasites preying on the weak. As they prepared to depart, Luffy noticed something in the pirate camp, a small chest, partially buried in the sand where one of the tents had collapsed. Curiosity drew him to it. Inside lay a logbook and a crude map. Flipping through the pages, Luffy's eyes widened. Admiral, he called. Akainu strode over, impatient to leave. What is it? These pirates, Luffy held up the logbook, they weren't just raiding villages. They were looking for something. Some kind of ancient weapon. Akainu snatched the book, scanning the pages with growing interest. This information needs to go directly to Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Well done, Luffy. On the voyage back to headquarters, Luffy couldn't shake a growing disquiet. The pirates had been pathetically weak compared to his training opponents, yet the Marines treated their capture as significant. If these were the feared criminals of the sea, then what was all his training for? More troublingly, he'd felt no satisfaction in defeating them. Where was the adventure Shanks had spoken of? The freedom of the seas? The captain's fearful question echoed in his mind, what are you? Luffy didn't know anymore. Word of Luffy's successful mission spread quickly through Marine headquarters. Sengoku summoned him for a personal commendation, and even the aloof Aokiji offered rare praise. The intelligence you recovered may have prevented a major incident, Sengoku explained. Those pirates were working for someone much more dangerous. Luffy nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He'd removed his marine cap the moment they returned, the straw hat once again in its rightful place. Given your performance, we're accelerating your training schedule, Sengoku continued. Admiral Kizaru will take you on a more complex mission next month. Yes, sir. The proper response came automatically now. After the meeting, Luffy wandered to the training grounds, unusually quiet without the constant bombardment of attacks he'd grown accustomed to. His thoughts churned with conflicting emotions. Ah, there you are. Akiji's lazy drawl interrupted his musings. The tall admiral approached with his characteristic slouch. Quite the hero of the hour, aren't you? Luffy kicked at the ground. I guess. Akiji studied him for a long moment. Something's bothering you. Spill it. Perhaps it was Akiji's more relaxed demeanor compared to the other admirals, or perhaps Luffy simply needed to voice his thoughts, but the words tumbled out. Those pirates were nothing like Shanks. They were just bullies with boats. Luffy looked up at Akiji. Is that all pirates are? Akiji sighed, dropping down to sit cross-legged on the ground. Sit, Luffy. Let me tell you something about the world that Akainu would rather you didn't hear. Luffy sat opposite him, curiosity piqued. The world isn't divided neatly into marines and pirates, Akiji began. There are cruel marines who abuse their power. There are pirates who protect islands better than we do. The badge doesn't make the man, his actions do. Then why are you a marine? Luffy asked. Akiji gazed up at the sky. Because despite its flaws, I believe in justice. My version of it, anyway. He glanced back at Luffy. Shanks, the pirate who gave you that hat, he's different from the trash you captured yesterday. He's a Yonko, one of the 4 most powerful pirates in the world. Luffy's eyes widened. Shanks is that strong? Strong enough that even Akainu wouldn't take him on without serious preparation. Akiji's lips quirked in a rare smile. The point is, Luffy, don't judge all pirates by the weaklings you met, just as you shouldn't judge all marines by the best of us. The conversation gave Luffy much to think about. If Shanks was that powerful, then his own training suddenly made more sense. He needed to become far stronger to fulfill his promise. But was he on the right path? The answer came unexpectedly, a week before his scheduled mission with Kizaru. Monkey D. Garp arrived at headquarters, his boisterous laughter echoing through the halls before he physically appeared. He found Luffy in the middle of a sparring session with several senior marine officers, all of whom were on the defensive against the Rubber Team's relentless attacks. Luffy. Garp's voice boomed across the training yard. Luffy froze mid-punch, his extended arms snapping back. Grandpa. The reunion was typically Garp, a bone-crushing hug followed immediately by a fist of love to the top of Luffy's head. Ow. What was that for? Luffy protested, rubbing the growing bump. For going 3 years without causing any major problems. Garp roared with laughter. I was sure you'd have destroyed half the base by now. The marine officers bowed respectfully to the vice admiral before making themselves scarce, leaving grandfather and grandson alone. Garp's expression sobered as he took in Luffy's appearance. You've grown, boy. And gotten stronger too, from what I hear. Luffy grinned. Yeah. I can even sense attacks coming before they happen sometimes. And my punches can shatter rocks now. Good, good. Garp nodded, but his eyes remained troubled. I've read the reports from the Admirals. They're impressed with your progress. Even Akainu. Luffy couldn't hide his surprise. In his own way. Garp sat heavily on a nearby bench, gesturing for Luffy to join him. He says you have acceptable combat capabilities but questionable dedication to absolute justice. Typical Sakazuki. Luffy sat beside his grandfather, fidgeting with his straw hat. Gramps, am I doing the right thing here? The question hung in the air between them. Garp sighed deeply. That depends on what right means, Luffy. You're becoming exactly what I hoped, a strong marine with the potential for greatness. He paused, studying his grandson's face. But I wonder sometimes if I've stolen something from you. My freedom, Luffy said quietly. Garp's expression softened. You remember what I told you when I brought you here? That the path you dreamed of leads to execution? Luffy nodded. I still believe that, Garp continued. But I've watched too many men live and die following orders they didn't believe in. That's no path for you either. So what should I do? Garp laughed suddenly, slapping Luffy on the back hard enough to send him sprawling. How should I know? You're my grandson, you'll figure it out. Just know that whatever you decide, you'd better be strong enough to back it up. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, Garp's recent missions, news from Fusha village, and Luffy's training exploits. By the time they parted, Luffy felt both comforted and more confused than ever. His grandfather hadn't told him what path to choose, but he had acknowledged that a choice existed. 2 days later, Fleet Admiral Sengoku called an emergency assembly of all Marine personnel at headquarters. Rumors swirled about the purpose, with many speculating about movements from one of the Yonko. Luffy stood in formation with the other trainees, his enhanced senses picking up fragments of conversation from the senior officers at the front. Celestial Dragon arrival. Unprecedented security requirements. All 3 admirals present. The pieces clicked together as Sengoku took the podium. Attention! In 48 hours, we will be hosting St. Charlos of the World Noble Family. This is a highest priority security operation. All leaves are cancelled, and all personnel will have assigned duties. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Visits from world nobles were rare and always complicated. Sengoku continued outlining the security protocols, but Luffy's attention drifted. He'd heard stories about the celestial dragons, the cruel, untouchable elites who claimed divine ancestry. Even Akainu, with his obsession with absolute justice, spoke of them with carefully neutral tones that betrayed neither respect nor disdain. Monkey D. Luffy. Sengoku's voice snapped Luffy back to attention. Given your unique abilities, you'll be assigned to Admiral Kizaru's security detail. Luffy blinked in surprise. Me, sir. Consider it a vote of confidence, Sengoku replied. Dismissed. As the assembly dispersed, Kizaru materialized beside Luffy in his typical fashion. Lucky you, the Admiral's sing-song voice carried its usual indecipherable tone. Front row seat to the circus. What do you mean? Luffy asked, falling into step beside him. Kizaru glanced around before responding. Let's just say our distinguished guests have specific tastes in entertainment. Stay alert, but more importantly, stay silent. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, not a word. Understood? The unusual seriousness in Kizaru's voice left Luffy nodding wordlessly. The arrival of St. Charlos transformed Marine headquarters. Red carpets lined every corridor. Marines stood at attention along the walls, instructed not to make eye contact with the world noble. The 3 admirals positioned themselves at strategic points, with Kizaru and Luffy near the main entrance. Remember, Kizaru murmured. Silent as light. A procession of Marines led by Sengoku himself escorted the portly, bubble-headed figure of St. Charlos into the building. The celestial dragon's fish-like eyes darted around disdainfully, his mouth twisted in perpetual disgust. Filthy place, he proclaimed, voice nasal and grating. I can smell the commoners. Sengoku bowed deeply. We are honored by your presence, St. Charlos. If there's anything you require, silence, Charlos cut him off. I'm here to inspect my property, not to converse with underlings. Where are the gift specimens I was promised? Luffy frowned. Gift specimens? The answer came as they proceeded to a specially prepared chamber. Inside, chained to the walls, were 5 people, 3 men and 2 women. Their expressions ranged from terrified to resigned. Pirates captured near Sabaody Archipelago, Sengoku explained. As requested, all devil fruit users. Charlos approached the prisoners, studying them like items in a shop. This one's ugly, he declared, pointing to a man with scales covering half his face. Execute him. Luffy stiffened, but Kizaru's hand on his shoulder tightened in warning. A marine officer stepped forward without hesitation, drawing his pistol and firing. The prisoner slumped against his chains, blood pooling beneath him. Much better, Charlos nodded in satisfaction. These other 4 will do for my collection. Have them properly collared and delivered to my ship. Luffy's hands clenched into fists, his whole body trembling with rage. The casual murder, the talk of collection, it violated everything he believed about justice, about freedom. Kizaru's grip on his shoulder became painful, the Admiral's fingers digging in hard enough to remind Luffy of his orders to remain silent. The inspection continued through various facilities, with Charlos making increasingly outrageous demands and comments. He ordered a female marine officer to crawl on all 4s because he liked the color of her hair. He demanded that training exercises be performed for his amusement, then complained they were boring. Throughout it all, the Marines, from the newest recruits to Fleet Admiral Sengoku himself, complied without complaint. When they reached the shipyard, Charlos spotted a fishman technician working on a marine vessel. Disgusting. Who allowed this creature on the premises? The fishman froze, tools still in hand. He's a specialist in hull repairs, St. Charlos, explained a nearby officer. One of the best in, I don't care if he can turn water into wine, Charlos interrupted. Fish belong in tanks or on plates, not walking around like people. He pulled a pistol from within his ornate robes. I'll rid you of this problem. Before anyone could react, he fired. The bullet struck the fishman in the shoulder, sending him toppling from the scaffolding into the water below. Luffy moved without thinking. His rubber arm stretched out, grabbing the wounded fishman before he could sink beneath the waves. With a snap, he pulled the injured technician back onto the dock. Silence fell over the shipyard. Charlos turned slowly, his bubble-encased face purpling with rage. Who dares interfere with a celestial dragon? Kizaru stepped forward smoothly. A training accident, nothing more. The boy's rubber powers sometimes activate involuntarily. He meant no disrespect. Rubber? Charlos's beady eyes fixed on Luffy with sudden interest. A paramecia user? How fascinating. He raised his pistol again, this time aiming directly at Luffy. I wonder if rubber bounces bullets better than fish scales. Time seemed to slow. Luffy saw the finger tightening on the trigger. Felt the air pressure change as Kizaru prepared to intervene. Sensed Akainu and Akiji converging on their position from different directions. But more than anything, he felt the weight of 3 years of training, of conflicting philosophies, of suppressed dreams, all crystallizing into a single moment of clarity. The bullet fired. Luffy didn't dodge. Instead, he caught it, his rubber hand enclosing the projectile and absorbing its momentum. Gasps echoed across the shipyard. Luffy opened his palm, letting the flattened bullet fall to the ground with a soft clink. He looked directly into Charlos's eyes, breaking every protocol he'd been taught. People aren't things, he said, voice quiet but carrying across the stunned silence. No one has the right to treat them that way. Not even you. Charlos's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Seize him. I want him executed immediately. Marines moved uncertainly, caught between their duty to obey the world noble and their hesitation to attack one of their own, especially one under the direct tutelage of the Admirals. Akainu arrived first, his expression thunderous. Monkey D. Luffy, stand down immediately. Akiji appeared a moment later, assessing the situation with uncharacteristic alertness. Kizaru merely sighed. Oh my, what a mess, Luffy stood his ground, straw hat firmly on his head, eyes never leaving Charlos. I won't. What did you say? Akainu growled, magma beginning to drip from his clenched fists. I won't stand down, Luffy repeated. This isn't justice. It's just bullying. And I won't be part of it anymore. The tension in the air could have been cut with a knife. The fate of the young rubber boy hung in the balance as the three most powerful fighters in the Marines surrounded him. Then, surprisingly, Akiji chuckled. Always knew the kid had more backbone than brains. Akainu's glare shifted to his fellow admiral. This is insubordination of the highest order, Kazan. Don't tell me you support this. Support? No. Akiji shrugged lazily. But I can't say I'm surprised either. We each tried to shape him in our image, but none of us considered he might have an image of his own. Enough of this chatter. Charlos screeched. I demand his head. Now. Sengoku pushed through the crowd, face grim. Saint Charlos, please allow me to handle this situation. The boy is clearly confused and, I'm not confused, Luffy interrupted. For the first time in 3 years, I'm seeing clearly. He looked around at the gathered Marines, at the 3 admirals who had taught him so much, and finally at the wounded fishman still clutching his bleeding shoulder. I came here to get stronger, and I did. But strength means nothing if you use it to hurt innocent people or stand by while others do. Luffy's voice grew stronger with each word. I'm done pretending. I'm not a Marine. I never was. With that, he removed his straw hat and held it high. My name is Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm going to be king of the pirates. The declaration hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. Akainu moved first, his arm transforming fully into magma. Then you die as a pirate. The attack came with blinding speed, a magma fist aimed directly at Luffy's heart. But 3 years of training under the Admirals had prepared Luffy for this moment better than anyone realized. He dodged with precision born from countless sessions with Akiji, his body bending at impossible angles. Then, channeling the speed Kizaru had drilled into him, Luffy counterattacked. Gomu Gomu no jet pistol. His fist shot forward with such velocity that the air around it superheated. It struck Akainu in the chest, actually forcing the Admiral back several steps, something no one present had ever witnessed. Luffy didn't press his advantage. Instead, he grabbed the injured fishman and leapt toward the nearest marine vessel. Stop him. Sengoku ordered, but the chaos of the moment worked in Luffy's favor. Marines scrambled in confusion, some moving to protect the still shrieking celestial dragon, others trying to intercept Luffy. Kizaru appeared in Luffy's path in a flash of light. Leaving so soon. After all our lessons, Luffy skidded to a halt, the fishman groaning in pain on his shoulder. I learned what I needed to, Admiral. Did you now? Kizaru raised a glowing finger. Show me. The light beam shot forth with the speed that gave Kizaru his reputation. But Luffy, anticipating the attack, twisted at the last possible moment, the beam passing so close it singed his shirt. Not bad, Kizaru nodded approvingly. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shifted slightly to the left, creating a clear path to the ship. Luffy's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't hesitate. He bolted forward, Kizaru making a show of trying to catch him but somehow always being just a fraction too slow. As Luffy reached the gangplank, a wall of ice erupted before him. Akiji stood at its base, hands in pockets. This is a bad idea, Luffy, he said calmly. You can't outrun the entire Marine force. I don't need to outrun all of them, Luffy replied. Just the ones here today. Akiji sighed. And what then? Where will you go? What will you do? Luffy grinned, the expression lighting up his face in a way it hadn't in years. Adventure. Freedom. All the things Shanks talked about. You'll be hunted. A bounty on your head before sundown. Good. Luffy declared. That just means I'm on the right track. Akiji stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. The ice wall cracked down the middle, creating a narrow passage. Your grandfather is going to kill me for this. Probably, Luffy agreed, stepping through the gap. Tell him I'm going to make him proud, just not the way he expected. Behind them, Akainu's roar of rage signaled his recovery. Luffy sprinted up the gangplank, depositing the fishman gently on the deck. Can you sail this thing? He asked. The fishman nodded weakly. Been repairing marine ships for 15 years. I know how they work. Great. Then let's go. Luffy paused. Wait, what's your name? Gil, the fishman replied, clutching his wounded shoulder. Why are you helping me? Luffy's grin widened. Because that's what friends do. Now let's get out of here before Magma Face melts the whole dock. As if on cue, a massive explosion rocked the shipyard as Akainu's attack connected with the spot where Luffy had stood moments before. Gil struggled to his feet and began working the controls. The ship's engines hummed to life, and it began pulling away from the dock just as Marines swarmed the area. On shore, Charlos continued his tantrum, demanding retribution. Sengoku barked orders to pursue. Akainu's rage manifested as waves of magma that set nearby vessels ablaze. Kizaru watched with his enigmatic smile. And Akiji simply turned and walked away, a faint smirk on his lips. Standing at the stern of the escaping ship, Luffy placed his straw hat firmly on his head, watching Marine headquarters grow smaller in the distance. 3 years of training under the most powerful fighters in the world had given him strength beyond his wildest dreams. But it was his decision in that moment, to stand for what he believed was right, regardless of the consequences, that finally set him on the path to becoming the man he was meant to be. The wind caught his straw hat, and Luffy grabbed it before it could blow away, remembering his promise to Shanks. I'm coming, he whispered to the open sea. Just like I promised. And when I find you, I'll be strong enough to return this hat. Behind him, Gil worked the controls with growing confidence. They'll send ships after us. Where should we head? Luffy turned, the adventure-hungry grin that had been suppressed for 3 long years now shining at full brightness. Doesn't matter. Every direction leads to freedom now. As Marine headquarters faded from view, Monkey D, Luffy took his first real breath as a pirate. The lessons of ice, magma, and light would serve him well, but from now on, he would forge his own path by his own rules. The journey to become king of the pirates had truly begun. Chapter 2, Forging a Different Path. 4 years flew by like they meant nothing. 17-year-old Monkey D, Luffy stood at the bow of his small ship, the morning sun warming his face and the familiar weight of his straw hat steady against his back. The sea stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of possibilities. Oi, Gil. How much longer till we reach Alabasta? Luffy called over his shoulder. The blue-scaled fishman glanced up from the navigation charts. 2 days if the wind holds. You sure about this, Luffy? The place will be crawling with Marines. Luffy grinned. Exactly why we're going. The best treasures always have the best guards. Gil sighed but couldn't hide his smile. For years sailing with Luffy had taught him that arguing was pointless when that particular grin appeared. The years since their dramatic escape from Marine headquarters had transformed them both. Gil's shoulder wound had healed into a jagged scar he wore proudly. Luffy had shot up several inches, his once lanky frame now packed with lean muscle. His fighting style had evolved into something uniquely his own, combining Akiji's strategic awareness, Kizaru's blinding speed, and Akainu's overwhelming power, all channeled through his rubber abilities. What hadn't changed was the straw hat. If anything, it looked more weathered but somehow more fitting on the young pirate captain. Captain, Gil called, interrupting Luffy's thoughts. News coup incoming. A seagull swooped down, dropping the latest newspaper before continuing its route. Luffy snatched it mid-air and flipped through the pages, looking for anything interesting, or more specifically, anything about himself. Ha! They updated my bounty again. He thrust the paper toward Gil, pointing at a wanted poster tucked inside. Monkey D. Luffy, 120 million berries, blared the headline above a photo of Luffy mid-punch, his arms stretched to impossible lengths. Impressive, Gil admitted. Especially since you've never killed anyone. Don't need to kill to make a point, Luffy replied, scanning the article beneath his photo. Straw Hat Luffy, former Marine trainee turned pirate, continues his rampage through Grand Line territories. His latest offense, disrupting world noble shipping operations and freeing 200 slaves bound for Mariewa. You sound proud, Gil observed. Course I am. That slave ship needed sinking. Luffy folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. Any bounty I get for helping people is a badge of honor. Gil shook his head in amusement. In 4 years of sailing together, they'd gathered no traditional crew, accumulated minimal treasure, and avoided the usual pirate activities. Instead, Luffy seemed determined to target the most powerful and corrupt officials in the world government, particularly anything connected to the celestial dragons. It made them both wanted criminals, but not typical pirates. The fishmen sometimes wondered if Luffy even understood what being a pirate traditionally meant. A distant boom snapped both of them to attention. On the horizon, smoke rose from what appeared to be a sea battle. Cannons, Gil said unnecessarily. Marine vessel by the look of that smoke pattern. Luffy's eyes narrowed, then lit up with excitement. Let's check it out. Might be someone who needs help. Or it might be a marine trap designed specifically to lure in a certain rubber-brained idiot, Gil muttered, already adjusting their course. Luffy laughed. Only one way to find out. As they drew closer, the situation became clear. A marine battleship was firing upon a much smaller vessel, not a pirate ship, but what appeared to be a civilian research boat. The smaller ship was taking heavy damage, listing badly to one side. They're attacking civilians. Luffy's cheerful expression hardened instantly. Gil, get us alongside the research vessel. I'm going to have a chat with those Marines. On it. Gil spun the wheel, expertly maneuvering their ship between the combatants. Try not to sink their battleship this time. We can't keep stealing marine vessels, they're starting to notice the pattern. Luffy cracked his knuckles. No promises. With practiced ease, he grabbed the mainmast and stretched his arm back. Goma Goma no rocket. His body shot across the open water, landing with perfect balance on the deck of the marine ship. Marines scattered in surprise, several immediately recognizing the infamous Straw Hat. It's Straw Hat Luffy. Sound the alarm. Call Vice Admiral Smoker. Luffy didn't give them time to organize. His fists blurred into action, rubber limbs stretching and contracting with lightning speed. Marines dropped unconscious on all sides, none even managing to draw their weapons. Who's in charge here? Luffy demanded, knocking aside 2 more Marines who rushed him with swords. That would be me. A deep voice cut through the chaos. Luffy turned to see a muscular man with 2 cigars clenched between his teeth. His white hair and jacket marked him as someone of rank, but it was the look in his eyes that caught Luffy's attention, sharp, analytical, and oddly familiar. Captain Smoker, the man introduced himself. And you're causing trouble on my ship, Straw Hat. Luffy tilted his head. You're attacking a civilian research vessel. Pretty sure you started the trouble. Civilian? Smoker scoffed. That ship belongs to an internationally wanted criminal, Nico Robin, the demon child of O'Hara. My orders are to capture her and seize all archaeological materials on board. The name meant nothing to Luffy, but the situation was clear enough. Don't care who's on that ship. Nobody deserves to be blasted out of the water without a chance to surrender. Surrender isn't an option for someone like her. Smoker's arms began to transform, white smoke pouring from his body. Just as it's no longer an option for you, Straw Hat. Luffy grinned. A Logia user? Interesting. Most pirates would flee at the sight of a Logia transformation. But Luffy had spent 3 years training against admirals with the most powerful Logia abilities in the world. Smoker's smoke seemed almost quaint in comparison. The Marine captain attacked first, launching a smoke-wreathed fist that extended across the deck. Luffy dodged with casual ease, moving just enough to avoid the blow. "You're gonna have to be faster than that," he taunted. Smoker's eyes narrowed. White launcher. His body dissolved into smoke, shooting toward Luffy in a concentrated stream. Luffy waited until the last second, then applied the tiniest bit of armament haki to his fist, just enough to make contact with Smoker's substantial form. Gomu Gomu no bullet. The punch connected with Smoker's jaw, sending the Marine captain crashing through the ship's railing. Marines watching the battle gasped in shock. He hit the captain. But how? Logia users can't be touched. Luffy flexed his fingers. For years of experimentation had helped him develop his own rudimentary version of haki. It wasn't as powerful as the Admirals, but it worked well enough against most opponents. Smoker picked himself up, genuine surprise on his face. "You're not just some lucky rookie, are you?" "Nope." Luffy cracked his neck. "Now call off the attack on that research ship, or we continue this dance." Before Smoker could respond, an explosion rocked the Marine vessel. The cannon deck had somehow caught fire, sending plumes of black smoke into the air. "Captain! We're taking on water." Lower decks reporting flooding. Smoker's gaze hardened. "This isn't over, Straw Hat." He turned to his crew. "Abandon ship protocols. All hands to lifeboats." Luffy took advantage of the chaos to rocket back to his own vessel, which was now alongside the damaged research ship. Gil had already thrown ropes across, helping the research vessel's crew evacuate to their more stable boat. Perfect timing with the explosion, Luffy called as he landed. "How'd you manage that?" Gil looked confused. "Wasn't me. I was busy getting these folks on board." He jerked a thumb toward a group of bedraggled researchers huddled on their deck. "If you're looking for credit, that would be mine," a smooth female voice said from behind Luffy. He turned to find himself face to face with a tall woman in her late 20s. She wore a purple cowboy hat over raven hair, her arms crossed casually over her chest. Something about her stance immediately told Luffy she was dangerous, and not someone to underestimate. "You must be the demon child," he said, recalling Smoker's words. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you're Straw Hat, Luffy, the Marine trainee gone rogue. Quite the reputation you've built in just 4 years. You've heard of me?" Luffy grinned, oddly pleased. "I make it my business to know about anyone who consistently disrupts world government operations." A faint smile touched her lips. "Though I admit, I didn't expect our paths to cross like this." "Captain," Gil interrupted, eyeing the woman cautiously. "Marine lifeboats are launching. We should move before their backup arrives." Luffy nodded. "Right. We'll give these folks a ride to the nearest port." "Actually," the woman interjected, "I need to reach Alabasta. If you're heading in that direction, I'd be grateful for passage." Gil began to object, but Luffy was already nodding enthusiastically. "Sure. We're going there anyway." "I'm Luffy, that's Gil, and you're?" "Nico Robin," she replied coolly. "And I suspect, Captain Luffy, that you have no idea what you've just involved yourself in." Robin proved to be a quiet passenger, spending most of her time reading books she'd salvaged from her damaged vessel. The other researchers had been dropped off at a small port, clearly relieved to part ways with the infamous archaeologist. On their second evening with her aboard, Luffy's curiosity finally got the better of him. He plopped down across from Robin on the deck where she sat reading by lantern light. "So what's in Alabasta that's got the Marines so worked up they'd attack a research ship?" Robin marked her page carefully before answering. "What do you know about the ancient weapons, Captain Luffy?" "Nothing," he replied honestly. "Is that like a big cannon or something?" A flicker of amusement crossed Robin's face. Not quite. The ancient weapons are 3 mythical armaments of unimaginable destructive power: Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus. For centuries, the world government has hunted down and eliminated anyone with knowledge of them. Luffy scratched his head. So you know about these weapons? I'm an archaeologist specializing in the Void Century, a 100-year period of history that the world government has forbidden anyone to study. Robin's eyes took on a hard glint. My entire home island of O'Hara was destroyed because scholars there dared to research this forbidden history. The government destroyed an entire island just for studying old books. Luffy frowned in disbelief. They called it a buster call. 5 vice admirals and 10 battleships, with orders to leave nothing alive. Robin's voice remained steady, but her hands tightened around her book. I was the only survivor. Luffy's frown deepened into something dangerous. That's not justice. That's just murder. Justice? Robin laughed bitterly. An interesting concept from someone trained by the 3 admirals. Which version did you prefer? Akainu's absolute justice? Akiji's lazy justice? Or perhaps Kizaru's unclear justice? None of them, Luffy replied without hesitation. They each got some things right and a lot of things wrong. Robin studied him with renewed interest. And what does justice mean to you, then? Luffy thought for a moment. Freedom. The chance for people to live how they want without hurting others or being hurt. He grinned suddenly. And adventure. Can't have justice without adventure. Robin blinked, then gave a genuine laugh, a sound she seemed unaccustomed to making. You're a strange pirate, Monkey D. Luffy. Thanks. So what's in Alabasta? Robin hesitated, clearly deciding how much to reveal. Rumors of an ancient stone called a poneglyph, a massive cube covered in text that only a handful of scholars can read. I believe this one contains information about Pluton. And you can read these stone thingies? I'm the only person alive who can. There was no pride in Robin's voice, only the weight of a terrible burden. Luffy nodded as if this made perfect sense. Cool. So we find this rock, you read it, and then what? Then. Robin paused. That depends on what it says. But the world government will do anything to stop us from finding out. Let them try, Luffy said with absolute confidence. I've beaten them before. Robin's expression turned serious. Captain Luffy, you've been lucky so far. Tangling with a few marine ships and freeing slaves is one thing. But if they believe you're helping me find ancient weapon information, they'll send the admirals after you. Instead of fear, Robin saw excitement light up Luffy's face. You think? I've always wondered how I'd stack up against them now. Robin stared at him in disbelief, then slowly shook her head. You truly have no idea what you're getting into. Luffy's grin widened. That's what makes it an adventure. They reached Alabasta the following afternoon, docking at Nanohana rather than the more heavily guarded capital city. The desert kingdom was suffering from a prolonged drought, evident in the haggard faces of the locals and the frequent marine patrols keeping order. Something's wrong here, Luffy observed as they made their way through the crowded market. Too many marines for a friendly visit. Robin nodded. Alabasta is on the verge of civil war. The marines claim they're here to support King Cobra, but their numbers suggest a different agenda. Let me guess, Gil muttered. They're really here for the same rock you're looking for. Precisely. Robin adjusted her hat to better shield her face from recognition. We need transportation into the desert. The poneglyph is rumored to be hidden beneath the ancient city of Yuba. Luffy stopped suddenly, sniffing the air. Food first. Can't adventure on an empty stomach. Without waiting for a response, he followed his nose to a small restaurant tucked between market stalls. Robin and Gil exchanged exasperated looks before following. The restaurant was nearly empty except for a single customer at the counter, a lean young man with green hair hunched over 3 katanas and a plate of food. He looked up briefly as they entered, his sharp eyes assessing and dismissing them in the same moment. Luffy, naturally, took the stool right next to him and immediately ordered enough food for 5 people. "You planning to eat all that yourself?" the green-haired swordsman asked with mild disgust as plates began piling up. "Yup," Luffy replied between mouthfuls. "Need energy for our desert adventure." The swordsman raised an eyebrow. "Desert adventure? Let me guess, treasure hunting?" "Nope. Looking for a giant stone cube with ancient writing about super weapons." Gil slapped a webbed hand over his face. "Unbelievable." Robin tensed, preparing to use her powers if necessary. But the swordsman merely grunted and returned to his meal. "Name's Roronoa Zoro," he said after a moment. "And if you're heading into the desert, you should know the Marines have blockaded all the regular routes. Some big operation going on." Luffy paused mid-bite. "You seem pretty well informed." Zoro shrugged. "I make it my business to know where Marines are. Makes it easier to avoid them." "You a pirate too?" "Bounty hunter," Zoro corrected. "Or I was. Now I'm just a wanderer looking for worthy opponents." Luffy studied him with sudden interest. "You any good with those swords?" A dangerous smile crept across Zoro's face. "Good enough that I'm still breathing." "Prove it." Robin and Gil exchanged alarmed glances as Luffy challenged the swordsman outright. Zoro considered Luffy for a long moment. Not interested in fighting some random kid with an appetite problem. Scared? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Zoro's hand moved to one of his katanas, but before he could draw, the door burst open. There he is. Roronoa Zoro. A squad of Marines poured into the small restaurant, weapons drawn. "Surrender now. You're under arrest for attacking Lieutenant Morgan." Zoro sighed. "See what I mean about knowing where Marines are?" "Excuse me." In one fluid motion, he drew all 3 katanas, placing one in his mouth and the others in his hands. What followed was a blur of motion. The Marines attacked as one, but Zoro moved between them like wind, his blades flashing too fast to track. Within seconds, all 5 Marines lay unconscious, and Zoro was calmly resheathing his swords. "Impressive," Luffy admitted, still eating as if nothing had happened. "But I bet I'm faster. Is this really the time?" Gil hissed, watching the door for more Marines. Zoro studied Luffy with new interest. "You talk big for a skinny kid." "Monkey D. Luffy," Robin interjected smoothly. "Perhaps you've heard of him. Current bounty 120 million berries." Recognition flashed in Zoro's eyes. "Straw Hat Luffy. The Marine trainee who punched a celestial dragon?" "I didn't punch him," Luffy clarified. "Just caught his bullet. Wanted to punch him though." Zoro laughed suddenly. "No wonder you're so confident." He glanced toward the door. "More will be coming. I should move." "We're heading into the desert," Luffy said. "Avoiding Marine blockades. Want to join us?" "Luffy." Gil protested. "We don't need," "Sure," Zoro cut him off. "Beats fighting through the entire Marine garrison alone." And just like that, their party gained a swordsman. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as they traveled. Despite Zoro's warnings about Marine blockades, Robin had secured them passage with a caravan of merchants through a little-known route. The green-haired swordsman proved his worth immediately, his intimidating presence deterring the few bandits they encountered. "So this poneglyph," Zoro asked on their second day in the desert, "what exactly does it do?" "It doesn't do anything," Robin explained. "It's a historical record carved in an indestructible stone, written in a language only scholars of O'Hara could decipher." "And you think it'll tell you about this ancient weapon, Pluton?" Robin nodded. "The rumors suggest this particular poneglyph contains coordinates or perhaps a blueprint." And what exactly are you planning to do with an ancient superweapon? Zoro's tone remained casual, but his hand rested near his swords. Study it, Robin replied simply. Knowledge is my only goal. Zoro looked unconvinced. She's telling the truth, Luffy interjected, walking backward ahead of them. Robin doesn't want to use the weapon. She wants to understand history. And you believe that? Zoro challenged. Luffy shrugged. Yup. People have a certain smell when they're lying. Robin doesn't have it. The archaeologist raised an eyebrow. That's quite the ability, Captain. Akiji taught me. Well, not directly, but I watched him when he interrogated people. He always knew who was lying. Luffy spun back around. Anyway, I don't care about the weapon. I just want to see this cool ancient stone. And helping Robin means messing with the world government, which is always fun. Zoro shook his head. You have a strange definition of fun, Straw Hat. They reached the ruins of Yuba by nightfall. Once a thriving desert city, it now lay half buried in sand, its abandoned buildings creating eerie silhouettes against the star-filled sky. Robin led them confidently through the ruins. The ancient texts describe a temple beneath the central plaza. There should be an entrance somewhere nearby. As they searched the area, a flicker of firelight caught Luffy's attention. Someone's already here. They approached cautiously, finding a makeshift camp set up near what appeared to be a recently excavated staircase leading underground. A single figure sat by the fire, a long-nosed young man who jumped to his feet in alarm as they appeared. Stay back, he stammered, brandishing what looked like a slingshot. I've got 3,000 men surrounding this place. Luffy burst out laughing. No you don't. There's nobody for miles. The young man's knees knocked together visibly. Alright, you caught me. But I'm still dangerous. The great Captain Usopp never goes down without a fight. Captain? Gil repeated skeptically. Of course. Haven't you heard of me? The great adventurer Usopp, explorer of ancient ruins and discoverer of countless treasures. Zoro rolled his eyes. Never heard of you. Well, I'm just getting started, Usopp admitted. But I've got big plans. This ruin is my ticket to fame and fortune. Robin stepped forward. You found the entrance to the temple. It wasn't a question, but Usopp nodded proudly. 3 days of digging. Whatever's down there must be valuable. It is, Robin confirmed. But not in the way you imagine. Luffy approached the staircase, peering into the darkness below. Looks spooky. I'm going in. Wait. Usopp grabbed his arm. There could be traps. Deadly creatures. Ancient curses. Sounds fun. Luffy shook him off and bounded down the stairs before anyone could stop him. Robin sighed. We should follow him before he touches something he shouldn't. As they descended, Usopp hurriedly packed his camping gear and joined them. I'm coming too. I discovered it, after all. The temple beneath Yuba was a marvel of ancient architecture. Massive pillars carved with intricate designs supported a ceiling that somehow remained intact despite the centuries. Their footsteps echoed in the vast chamber as Robin examined the hieroglyphs on the walls. This way, she indicated, following the symbols. The inner chamber should be ahead. They proceeded deeper into the temple, Usopp jumping at every shadow while Zoro maintained a vigilant guard. Luffy bounded ahead, treating the ancient site like a playground. Oi, Robin. Is this what we're looking for? He called from an adjoining chamber. They rushed to join him, and there it stood. A massive cube of black stone, taller than a man and covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. A poneglyph, Robin whispered, approaching it with reverence. Her fingers traced the symbols, her expression a mixture of awe and sorrow. Can you read it? Luffy asked, watching her closely. Robin nodded, moving methodically around the stone. It speaks of Alabastus' ancient history, the founding of the kingdom, and yes, here, she stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. What is it? Gil pressed. This isn't about Pluton at all, Robin said softly. It's about something called the Great Kingdom and its war against what would become the world government. Her fingers continued tracing the symbols. It says the truth is hidden in the place where two worlds meet, beneath the tree of knowledge that touches both heaven and earth. That's cryptic, Zoro commented. It's a map, Robin realized. Or rather, directions to another poneglyph, one that does contain information about Pluton. Usopp, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Guys? I think we have company. They turned to find the entrance to the chamber blocked by a contingent of Marines, led by a tall man with a sleeping mask pushed up on his forehead. Admiral Akiji, Luffy breathed, instinctively stepping in front of Robin. The Admiral's lazy gaze fixed on Luffy. It's been a while, kid. You've grown. What are you doing here, Kazan? Luffy demanded, using the Admiral's real name. Same as you. Following the demon child. Akiji's eyes shifted to Robin. Though I admit, I didn't expect to find you with her, Luffy. You've chosen dangerous company. Robin's my friend, Luffy stated firmly. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps even pride, crossed Akiji's face. Still making snap judgments about who to trust, I see. Some things never change. How did you find us? Robin asked, her voice steady despite the tension. We've been tracking you since your research vessel was attacked, Akiji replied. Captain Smoker was quite thorough in his report about who came to your rescue. He took a step forward, ice crystals forming around his feet. Nico Robin, you're under arrest for violations against the world government. The rest of you can leave, even you, Straw Hat. This doesn't have to get messy. Luffy's response was immediate. Gomu Gomu no pistol. His fist shot forward, catching Akiji by surprise and connecting solidly with his chest. The Admiral stumbled back, genuine shock registering on his face. You've learned to use haki. Picked it up along the way, Luffy grinned, settling into a fighting stance. I've learned lots of things since I left. The Marines moved to engage, but Akiji held up a hand. Stand down. This is between the student and teacher. I've got nothing to learn from you anymore, Luffy declared. We'll see about that. Akiji's body began to transform, ice spreading across his form. Ice time. The temperature in the chamber plummeted as Akiji launched his attack. A wave of freezing air swept toward them, threatening to turn everything to ice. But Luffy was ready. Everyone behind me. He inhaled deeply, his rubber body expanding to enormous proportions. Gomu Gomu no balloon. The freezing blast hit Luffy's expanded body and scattered, the rubber acting as an insulator against the worst of the cold. Still, frost formed on his skin, and his movements slowed as the temperature dropped. Interesting defense, Akiji acknowledged. But how long can you maintain it? Zoro stepped up beside Luffy. He doesn't have to. Drawing all three swords, he launched himself at the Admiral. Onigiri. The attack sliced through Akiji's ice form, momentarily disrupting it and giving Luffy time to recover. Usopp, Gil hissed, is there another way out of here? The long-nosed explorer nodded frantically. Maybe. I saw some passages branching off further back. Robin, Luffy called, never taking his eyes off Akiji. Go with them. Find the exit. I'm not leaving you, she replied firmly. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when you decided to protect me. Robin crossed her arms in her signature pose. Vainte fleur. 20 arms sprouted from the bodies of the Marine soldiers, twisting their own weapons against them and creating chaos in their ranks. Akiji's expression hardened. So that's how it is. Ice daggers formed in his hands. Ice saber. The battle erupted in full force. Luffy and Zoro engaged Akiji directly, while Robin and Gil handled the marine soldiers. Usopp, despite his obvious terror, provided support with surprisingly effective projectiles from his slingshot. Luffy found himself falling into familiar patterns from his training days, anticipating Akiji's moves, recognizing the telegraphed signs of his major attacks. But there was a crucial difference now. Where the young Luffy had been fighting to learn, the current Luffy fought with purpose and conviction. "You've improved," Akiji commented, blocking a rubber kick with an ice shield. "But you're still holding back." "Why?" Luffy didn't answer immediately, launching another flurry of attacks that forced the Admiral to defend. "Because I don't want to hurt you," he finally admitted. "You were the only one who ever treated me like a person, not a weapon." Something shifted in Akiji's expression. "And now you're helping the most dangerous woman in the world access information about ancient weapons. You think that's being treated like a person?" "She's using you, Luffy." "No," Luffy replied with absolute certainty. "She's searching for truth. Just like I am." The fight continued to escalate, the ancient chamber taking damage from their powerful attacks. Pillars cracked, and the ceiling began to show signs of stress. "This place is going to collapse," Usopp shouted, dodging falling debris. Akiji seemed to reach a decision. "Enough of this." The temperature dropped dramatically as he prepared his most powerful attack. Ice Age. Everything began to freeze, the floor, the walls, the very air around them. Luffy recognized the technique from his training days. It was the attack that had once frozen an entire base solid for a week. "Everyone out now," he ordered, gathering his energy for a counter. Robin, Gil, Usopp, and Zoro retreated toward the exit Usopp had identified, but Luffy stood his ground, facing his former mentor. "You're not going to win this one, Luffy," Akiji said softly. "Some opponents are still beyond you." Luffy grinned. "Maybe. But I don't need to win. I just need to make sure my friends escape." He brought both arms back, twisting them together. Gomu Gomu no twin jet pistol. The double-powered attack struck not at Akiji, but at the weakened ceiling above. The ancient stone gave way with a tremendous crack, tons of rubble cascading down between them. Akiji's eyes widened in surprise as he was forced to defend against the falling debris. By the time he cleared a path, Luffy had vanished down the exit passage. "Clever boy," the Admiral murmured. "You really were paying attention during those lessons." They emerged from the ruins into the desert night, running until their lungs burned and the temple was far behind them. "That was an admiral." Usopp gasped when they finally stopped to rest. "An actual admiral. And you fought him to a standstill." "Not exactly," Luffy admitted, collapsing onto the sand. "If Akiji had been serious from the start, we'd all be popsicles right now." He held back, Robin agreed, studying Luffy with newfound respect. "Because of you." Zoro cleaned sand from his swords methodically. "So what's the plan now?" "They'll be after us with everything they've got." "We need to get back to the ship," Gil said. "Before they can establish a proper blockade." Robin shook her head. "We need to decipher these clues first." The poneglyph mentioned the place where two worlds meet, beneath the tree of knowledge. "Why does that matter now?" Usopp demanded. "We should be running for our lives." "Because," Robin replied patiently, "this information could lead to understanding why the world government is so desperate to erase history. It could explain why they destroyed my home." Luffy sat up, brushing sand from his straw hat. "Robin's right. We didn't come this far to run away with nothing." He looked at each of them in turn. "But I won't force any of you to stay. This is my choice." Gil sighed heavily. "For years and you still haven't learned basic self-preservation." "I'm with you, Captain." "Me too," Zoro said simply. That admiral was a worthy opponent. I want to see what other strong enemies this path brings. All eyes turned to Usopp, who was visibly sweating despite the cool night air. I. He swallowed hard, then straightened his back. The great Captain Usopp never abandons an adventure halfway. Besides, I discovered that temple, so technically you all work for me now. Luffy burst out laughing, the tension of the moment broken. That's settled then. Robin, where do we go next? Before she could answer, the ground beneath them trembled. Sand shifted and parted as something massive emerged, a giant scorpion, its stinger gleaming in the moonlight. Desert King Scorpion. Usopp shrieked. They're supposed to be extinct. The creature lunged, its pincers snapping at them. They scattered, Zoro drawing his swords while Luffy readied for battle. But before either could attack, a blaze of fire engulfed the scorpion's head. It writhed in agony, retreating back beneath the sand. What the hell? Zoro muttered, looking around for the source of the flames. A figure stepped out from behind a nearby dune, a shirtless young man with dark hair and a distinctive tattoo on his back. He grinned at their shocked expressions. You guys look like you could use a hand, he said casually. Desert creatures can be a pain if you don't know how to handle them. Luffy stared at the newcomer, an odd sense of familiarity washing over him despite being certain they'd never met. Thanks for the help. Who are you? The young man's grin widened. Name's Portgas D. Ace. And unless I'm mistaken, you're my little brother, Luffy. The revelation stunned everyone, none more than Luffy himself. They made camp behind the shelter of a large dune, lighting a small fire as Ace explained. Garp never told you about me? Ace asked, poking at the flames with a stick. Figures. The old man likes his secrets. Garp is your grandfather too? Luffy was still processing the information. Ace nodded. He took me in when I was just a baby, same as you. But he sent me to live with mountain bandits instead of taking me to Marine headquarters. Lucky you, Luffy muttered. Maybe. Ace studied him thoughtfully. Though from what I've heard, the Marine training paid off. You've made quite a name for yourself, little brother. The way he said, little brother, with a mixture of pride and amusement, sparked something in Luffy. A longing he hadn't realized he carried for family beyond his distant grandfather. How did you find me? Luffy asked. I've been tracking you for months, Ace admitted. When I heard stories about a rubber pirate with a straw hat fighting against the world government, I had to see for myself if it was Garp's grandson. You're a pirate too? Gil asked suspiciously. 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, Ace confirmed, showing a tattoo on his arm. The old man took me in when I was just starting out. Whitebeard? Zoro's eyes widened. The strongest man in the world? Ace grinned. The very same. Which makes all of you my little brother's friends, and therefore under Whitebeard's protection if you need it. Luffy tried to imagine having someone like Whitebeard backing him, the way the Admirals had once represented the force behind his actions. The idea was both appealing and strange. I don't need protection, he said finally. But I wouldn't mind getting to know my brother. Ace's smile softened. That's why I'm here, Luffy. That, and to warn you, you're making powerful enemies. The world government isn't taking your actions lightly. Because of Robin? Luffy glanced at the archaeologist, who sat slightly apart from the group. Partly. The demon child has been on their most wanted list for 20 years. But it's more than that. Ace leaned forward, his expression serious. They fear what you represent. A former Marine trainee personally trained by the Admirals, now actively fighting against them. You're living proof their system can create its own worst enemies. Robin spoke up. There's something else you should know, Fire Fist. She told him about the poneglyph and its cryptic message. Ace listened intently. The place where two worlds meet, beneath the tree of knowledge. I've heard something like this before. He thought for a moment. There's an island in the North Blue called O'Hara. It was known for its enormous library built around a massive tree called the Tree of Knowledge. Robin's face went pale. That's my home. The island the Marines destroyed. I'm sorry, Ace said genuinely. But if the Poneglyph is directing you there. There's nothing left to find, Robin finished. The Buster call was thorough. Maybe not, Luffy interjected. It said, beneath the tree, right? What if whatever we're looking for survived underground? Robin considered this. It's possible. The roots of the Tree of Knowledge extended deep into the earth. Then that's where we go next, Luffy decided. To O'Hara. Usopp sputtered. To a destroyed island that the world government specifically obliterated to keep people away from. Are you insane? Probably, Luffy grinned. But that's what makes it interesting. Ace laughed. You really are my brother. He stood up, brushing sand from his shorts. I'll help you get back to your ship. The Marines have set up blockades at all the major ports, but I know a few smugglers' routes. As they prepared to move out, Luffy pulled Ace aside. Why are you really helping us? Not that I'm not happy to meet my brother, but this seems like a big risk for a Whitebeard commander. Ace's expression grew serious. Because there are things about our family, our real family, that you need to know. Things Garp would never tell you. He placed a hand on Luffy's shoulder. But now isn't the time. Let's get you to safety first, then we'll talk. True to his word, Ace guided them through the desert using little-known paths. His knowledge of Alabasta was impressive, suggesting he'd spent significant time in the kingdom. I've been investigating something here for Whitebeard, he explained when Luffy questioned him. A man named Blackbeard, former crewmate of mine who betrayed us. Intel suggested he had contacts in Alabasta. Did you find him? Zoro asked. Ace shook his head. Not yet. But I will. There was something dark in his voice when he spoke of Blackbeard, a personal vendetta that went beyond crew loyalty. They reached Nanohana under cover of darkness, only to find the port crawling with Marines. Damn, Ace muttered as they observed from the outskirts of town. They've got more men than I expected. Gil pointed toward the harbor. There's our ship, third dock from the end. But getting to it through that security. We need a distraction, Robin suggested. Usopp gulped. What kind of distraction? The loud, explosive kind, Ace grinned, flames dancing between his fingers. I can draw their attention to the east side of town. That should give you enough time to reach your ship and get away. I'm not leaving you to face them alone, Luffy protested. I'm not planning to face them at all, Ace assured him. Just create chaos, then disappear. Trust me, little brother, I've gotten out of worse situations. Before Luffy could argue further, a familiar figure caught his attention in the harbor, the white-haired Marine captain from the battleship. Smoker's here, he warned. He's a Logia user like you, Ace. Smoke powers. Ace nodded. I've heard of him. Tenacious guy, supposedly incorruptible. Rare in the Marines these days. He seemed different, Luffy admitted. Not like most Marines I've dealt with. All the more reason to avoid a direct confrontation, Robin pointed out. We need to focus on escape, not fighting. They finalized their plan quickly. Ace would create a distraction at the East Warehouse district. During the chaos, the rest would make their way to the ship and prepare to sail immediately. Ace would rendezvous with them at sea using his personal craft. Ready? Ace asked, flames already engulfing his fists. Luffy impulsively pulled his newly discovered brother into a quick hug. Be careful. I just found out I have a brother, I don't want to lose you already. Ace seemed surprised by the gesture but returned it warmly. Don't worry about me. Just keep your crew safe. With that, he was gone, racing toward the eastern side of town. Minutes later, massive explosions rocked the harbor as warehouses burst into flames. Marines scrambled in response, exactly as planned. "That's our cue," Zoro said, drawing his swords. "Stay close and move fast." They slipped into town, using the confusion to their advantage. Most of the Marines had indeed rushed toward the fires, leaving their path relatively clear. They made it halfway to the docks before their luck ran out. "Straw Hat." Captain Smoker's voice cut through the night. "I should have known you'd be involved in this chaos." He stood directly in their path, his jit gripped tightly and smoke already swirling around his body. Behind him, a squad of Marines quickly formed a blockade. "We don't have time for this," Luffy muttered. "Everyone, get to the ship. I'll handle Smoker." "We're not leaving you," Gil began, but Luffy cut him off. "That's an order, first mate. Get Robin to safety." Something in Luffy's tone, a seriousness that rarely surfaced, convinced Gil to obey. He nodded reluctantly. "Don't take too long, Captain." As the others slipped away toward the docks, Luffy faced Smoker. "We really don't have to fight, you know. You could just let us go." Smoker's expression remained impassive. "You know I can't do that, Straw Hat." "Because of orders?" Luffy shook his head. "Orders aren't always right. The world government isn't always right. And you are." Smoker challenged. "A pirate barely out of childhood, playing revolutionary." "I'm not playing anything," Luffy replied, his voice hardening. "I've seen what the world government does to people who just want to be free. I've seen how they treat anyone who questions them." "So your answer is piracy? Chaos?" "My answer is fighting for something better." Luffy settled into a combat stance. "Now are we doing this, or what?" Smoker charged, his body transforming into smoke as he closed the distance. White blow. Luffy dodged, having learned from their previous encounter. He countered with a hockey-infused punch that Smoker barely evaded. "You fight like someone with formal training," Smoker noted, reforming a few feet away. "The rumors about you training under the Admirals, they're true, aren't they?" 3 years, Luffy confirmed, launching another attack. "Learned a lot about what justice isn't." Their battle intensified, drawing them away from the docks. Luffy realized belatedly that Smoker was deliberately leading him away from his crew, a tactical decision that showed the captain's intelligence. White launcher. Smoker's body dissolved entirely, becoming a torpedo of smoke that slammed into Luffy with surprising force. Luffy skidded backward, his rubber body absorbing most of the impact. "Not bad. But I've fought stronger." He inhaled deeply. Gomu Gomu no balloon. His body inflated to massive proportions just as Smoker attacked again. The expansion caught the Smoke Man by surprise, dispersing his form momentarily. Luffy took advantage of the opening. Gomu Gomu no jet Gatling. His fists became a blur, each strike infused with just enough haki to connect with Smoker's substantial form. The Marine captain was driven back under the barrage, unable to fully transform to avoid the hits. He crashed through the wall of a nearby building, momentarily stunned. Luffy didn't press his advantage. Instead, he turned toward the harbor. "Sorry, Smokey. We'll finish this another time." Before he could leave, Smoker's voice stopped him. "Why are you helping her, Straw Hat? Do you know what Nico Robin has done?" Luffy glanced back. "I know what the world government claims she's done. I also know they destroyed her entire island to keep some secret about history. It's more complicated than that. It always is." Luffy adjusted his straw hat. "But I judge people by what I see, not what others tell me. And Robin just wants to learn the truth." Smoker pulled himself from the rubble, brushing dust from his jacket. "The truth can be dangerous. So can lies," Luffy countered. "Maybe that's what the government is really afraid of." With that, he stretched his arm to grab a distant rooftop and catapulted himself toward the harbor, leaving Smoker standing amid the debris of their battle. He arrived at the docks to find his crew already on board their ship, sails unfurled and ready to depart. But something was wrong. They were surrounded by marine vessels blocking the harbor exit. Luffy landed on the deck beside Zoro. "Where's Ace?" "Still creating diversions," the swordsman replied grimly. "But we've got bigger problems. Look." At the harbor entrance, a massive marine battleship had appeared, its distinctive figurehead marking it as a vice admiral's vessel. "Who is it?" Luffy asked, squinting at the distant ship. Robin's voice was tight with tension. "Vice Admiral Garp." Luffy's breath caught in his throat. "Grandpa was here. Now. Can we fight our way past him?" Gil asked, though he sounded doubtful. "No," Luffy said firmly. "Not Garp. He's too strong." "Then we're trapped," Usopp moaned. "We'll be executed for sure." "Maybe not." Robin pointed toward the eastern side of the harbor, where fires still raged from Ace's distractions. "Look." A column of flame shot skyward, taking the shape of an enormous fist, Ace's signal. Luffy understood immediately. "Everyone hold on to something solid." "What?" "Why?" Usopp began, but his question was answered by a massive explosion that rocked the entire harbor. Ace had ignited the ammunition depot. The resulting blast created a tidal wave that lifted all vessels in the harbor. In the chaos, their ship was pushed directly toward the harbor exit, and Garp's battleship. "He's clearing our path." Zoro realized, gripping the railing as their ship rode the wave. Marine vessels collided with one another, their formations disrupted by the unexpected surge. Only Garp's battleship remained steady, positioned directly in their escape route. As they approached on the massive wave, Luffy saw his grandfather standing at the bow, arms crossed and expression unreadable behind the distance. "Luffy," Gil called urgently. "We're going to collide with the Vice Admiral's ship." "No," Luffy said quietly. "We're not." Just as collision seemed inevitable, Garp's battleship moved, not toward them, but sideways, creating a narrow channel to the open sea. Luffy's eyes widened in disbelief. Had Grandpa just... They shot through the gap like a cork from a bottle, the wave carrying them past the marine blockade and into open waters. Behind them, Garp's voice carried across the distance. "Luffy. Next time I won't be so careless with my ship positioning." Despite everything, Luffy laughed. The message was clear to anyone who knew Garp. He had deliberately let them escape while maintaining his marine dignity. "Your grandfather is a very interesting man," Robin observed, coming to stand beside Luffy at the stern. "Yeah," Luffy agreed softly. "He is." A small vessel approached from their starboard side, Ace on his personal craft, grinning widely. "Told you I'd make it," he called, jumping aboard their ship with inhuman agility. "Though I didn't expect Gramps to show up." That was a surprise. A good surprise, apparently, Zoro noted, sheathing his swords now that immediate danger had passed. Luffy stared back at the receding harbor, where Marines scrambled to reorganize their forces. "He let us go." "Don't read too much into it," Ace advised. "Garp is still a vice admiral, devoted to the Marines. Next time, he might not be so careless." But Luffy couldn't help feeling that something significant had just happened, a silent acknowledgement from his grandfather that perhaps Luffy's path, while not what Garp had planned, wasn't entirely wrong either. 3 days later, they were well on their way to O'Hara, or what remained of it. Ace had decided to accompany them, at least for the time being, claiming his search for Blackbeard could wait. Besides, he told Luffy as they sat on deck beneath the stars, "I've got 4 years of brother stuff to catch up on." Luffy grinned. "Brother stuff?" "You know, teaching you things. Giving you advice. Making fun of you when you do something stupid." "I think I can do without that last part," Luffy laughed. Ace became serious suddenly. Luffy, there's something you should know, something about our father. Our father? I thought we had different parents. We do. But your father. He's not just anyone. Ace glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Your father is Monkey D. Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army. Luffy blinked. The Revolutionary Army? What's that? An organization dedicated to overthrowing the world government. Ace shook his head in amazement. You really don't know anything about this? Garp never mentioned it. Gramps never talked about my parents, Luffy admitted. I didn't even know their names. Well, now you know why. Dragon is the most wanted man in the world. And you're following in his footsteps without even realizing it. Luffy absorbed this information slowly. A father he'd never known, leading a revolution against the very organization Luffy himself had come to oppose. It seemed too coincidental. Is that why you sought me out? He asked. Because of Dragon? Ace shook his head firmly. No. I came because you're my brother. Dragon has nothing to do with that. He paused. Though I admit, I was curious if you knew about him, if that connection influenced your actions. It didn't, Luffy stated. Everything I've done is because of what I've seen myself. The world government, the celestial dragons, the way they treat people who just want to be free, that's why I fight them. Just like your old man, Ace mused. Maybe it's in your blood after all. Before Luffy could respond, Robin approached them. Captain, there's something you should see. She led them to her cabin, where maps and books were spread across a small table. I've been researching what we might find at O'Hara, trying to piece together what the poneglyph might have been referring to. And? Luffy prompted. The Tree of Knowledge wasn't just a library, Robin explained, pointing to an old illustration. It was built around an actual tree of enormous size, so large that its roots were said to reach the bottom of the ocean. Where two worlds meet, Ace murmured. Land and sea. Robin nodded. Exactly. I believe whatever we're looking for is underwater, beneath where the tree once stood. Underwater? Usopp had entered behind them and overheard. But half of us are devil fruit users. We can't swim. We'll figure something out, Luffy said confidently. We always do. A commotion on deck interrupted their planning. They rushed outside to find Zoro and Gil on alert, both staring at an approaching vessel. Marines? Luffy asked, joining them at the railing. No, Zoro replied. At least, not a marine ship. But it's definitely following us. The vessel was elegant but practical, a high-end caravel with unmarked white sails. As it drew closer, they could see a solitary figure at the helm. They're signaling, Gil observed as flags were raised on the approaching ship. What does it say? Luffy asked. Friend, not foe. Request permission to approach. Gil lowered his spyglass. Could be a trap. Luffy studied the distant ship for a moment, then nodded. Let them approach, but stay ready. As the vessel came alongside, they got a better look at its sole occupant, a slender young woman with long orange hair and a confident stance. She waved cheerfully. Permission to come aboard, she called. State your business first, Zoro replied, hand on his swords. Information exchange, the woman answered promptly. I have something you want, and you have something I want. And what might that be? Robin asked. The woman smiled. My name is Nami. I'm a cartographer and navigator, the best you'll find in these waters. And I have detailed underwater maps of O'Hara that I'm willing to trade. Robin stiffened. How did you know we're heading to O'Hara? Because I've been tracking the movements of world government agents obsessed with finding Nico. Robin, Nami replied simply. When I heard you left Alabasta after finding something in ancient ruins, it wasn't hard to guess your next destination. And what do you want in exchange for these maps? Luffy asked. Nami's smile widened. A share of whatever you find there, and passage on your ship. I have people after me, and it's getting tiresome evading them alone. Pirates. Ace guessed. Worse. Tax collectors. Nami's expression darkened momentarily before returning to its business-like pleasantness. So, do we have a deal? Luffy laughed suddenly. I like you. Come aboard. Just like that. Zoro protested. She could be working for the Marines. She's not, Luffy stated with certainty. I can tell. Nami transferred to their ship with practiced ease, bringing only a small trunk and a curious staff-like weapon. You won't regret this, she assured them, opening the trunk to reveal rolled parchments. These maps will save you weeks of searching. Robin examined them with expert care. These are remarkably detailed. How did you acquire them? I have my sources, Nami replied evasively. Let's just say the world government isn't the only organization interested in O'Hara's secrets. As they pored over the maps together, integrating Nami's information with their existing plans, Luffy felt an unfamiliar sensation settling in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it, contentment. For years, it had just been him and Gil against the world. Now, somehow, he had the beginnings of a real crew. Ace caught his expression and grinned knowingly. Feels good, doesn't it? Having people who chose to follow you, not because they were ordered to, but because they want to. Luffy nodded. Yeah. It really does. The approach to O'Hara was somber. Even from a distance, the island's devastation was apparent, a blackened scar on the ocean where a thriving community had once stood. Robin stood at the bow, her face a mask of controlled emotion as her homeland came into view. 20 years had passed since the buster call that destroyed everything she had known, yet the sight still struck her like a physical blow. Luffy joined her silently, offering his presence without words. I was just a child, she said after a long moment. 8 years old when they came. 5 vice admirals, 10 battleships, all to destroy a library and the scholars who dared to read the wrong books. I'm sorry, Luffy said simply. Robin's gaze remained fixed on the approaching island. They called it justice. It wasn't, Luffy stated firmly. No, she agreed. It was fear. Fear of the truth. Her hands tightened on the railing. I've spent 20 years running, searching, trying to piece together what was so dangerous that they would commit genocide to keep it hidden. And now we're going to find out, Luffy promised. Whatever it is, Robin, we'll find it together. She glanced at him, studying his determined face. Why do you care so much about this, Luffy? This isn't your fight. Yes it is, he replied without hesitation. They destroyed your home, made you spend your life running, all to keep some secret about history. That's exactly the kind of thing I can't stand. A small smile touched Robin's lips. You're a strange man, Monkey D. Luffy. So people keep telling me. He grinned back at her. Their approach to the island was cautious. Nami's map showed a sheltered cove on the far side of O'Hara, away from where the Tree of Knowledge had stood. They anchored there, preparing equipment for the underwater exploration. According to these charts, Nami explained, spreading a map across the deck, the tree's root system created a kind of underwater cave network. If there's anything hidden where two worlds meet, it would be in the central chamber, here. She indicated a point directly beneath where the massive tree had once stood. That's quite deep, Gil observed. And a complex route. I can guide you, Nami assured him. I've navigated worse. The problem is getting there, Zoro pointed out. Half our crew can't swim, remember? I've thought of that, Robin said. During my research, I found references to ancient diving equipment once used in Water 7. If we could acquire something similar. No need, Gil interrupted. I'm a fishman. I can carry someone down there and back. And I'll go too, Nami volunteered. I'm an excellent swimmer. It should be me, Robin insisted. I'm the only one who can read any poneglyphs we find. And I'm going because it's my adventure. Luffy declared. Ace shook his head. Luffy, you can't swim at all. Your devil fruit makes that impossible. Then we'll figure something out. Maybe a rope system, or this, Usopp interrupted, producing what looked like a large glass bubble attached to a hose. I call it the Usopp Special Breathing Apparatus. I designed it myself for underwater treasure hunting. They all stared at the contraption dubiously. Has it been tested? Nami asked. Usopp's confident pose faltered slightly. Well, not in actual ocean conditions, but the theory is sound. After much debate, they settled on a plan. Gil would escort Robin to the underwater caves, where she could examine any poneglyphs or artifacts. Nami would accompany them as navigator. Usopp would remain on the ship with his breathing apparatus ready as backup. Luffy, Ace, and Zoro would guard the vessel and keep watch for marine patrols. As Robin prepared to enter the water with Gil and Nami, Luffy approached her. Be careful down there, he said seriously. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, get out immediately. Whatever's down there isn't worth your life. Robin seemed surprised by his concern. I've been searching for these answers my entire life, Luffy. I can't turn back now. I'm not saying turn back, he clarified. Just be smart about it. We'll have other chances if this doesn't work out. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll be careful. We all will. With that, the three swimmers slipped into the water, Robin holding tightly to Gil's shoulders as he dove beneath the surface. Nami followed closely, her strong strokes keeping pace with the fishman's natural speed. Luffy watched them disappear with an unfamiliar sense of anxiety. He was used to facing dangers head-on, not waiting while others took risks. They'll be fine, Ace assured him, sensing his brother's tension. Fishmen can breathe underwater, and Nami seems capable. It's not them I'm worried about, Luffy admitted. It's what they might find. Robin's been chasing these answers her whole life. What if the truth is worse than not knowing? Ace had no answer for that. Time passed slowly as they kept watch. Usopp paced the deck nervously, checking and rechecking his breathing apparatus. Zoro napped against the mast, though his hand never strayed far from his swords. Luffy scanned the horizon periodically for any sign of approaching vessels. An hour passed. Then 2. They should have been back by now, Luffy muttered, peering into the clear water around their ship. Underwater exploration takes time, Ace reasoned. And if they found something? Still, Luffy insisted. Something doesn't feel right. As if in answer to his concern, bubbles suddenly erupted on the water's surface. Nami's head appeared, gasping for air. Help, she sputtered. Cave collapse, Robin trapped, Gil trying to clear the way. Luffy didn't hesitate. Usopp. You're breathing thing. Now. The long-nosed inventor scrambled to prepare his contraption, attaching the glass bubble to Luffy's head while explaining the operation of the air pump in frantic tones. Remember, you'll need someone to operate the pump from here, he cautioned. And it's never been tested at extreme depths, no time. Luffy cut him off, securing the apparatus. Ace, keep pumping no matter what. Zoro, be ready to pull us up if I tug the rope 3 times. Before anyone could offer further objections, Luffy dove into the water. The sensation of weakness immediately washed over him, the curse of devil fruit users in seawater, but the glass bubble around his head provided air, and the rope attached to his waist kept him connected to the surface. Nami appeared beside him, recovered enough to dive again. She grabbed his arm and pulled him downward, guiding him through the crystal-clear waters toward a dark opening in the seafloor. Despite his weakness, Luffy focused on kicking his legs, helping their descent. The underwater cave mouth loomed before them, a jagged tear in the ocean floor where massive roots had once anchored the tree of knowledge. Inside the cave, the water was darker, illuminated only by the faint glow of phosphorescent organisms clinging to the walls. Nami pointed urgently forward, leading Luffy through a twisting tunnel system. They found Gil frantically moving large rocks from a pile of debris. Behind the obstruction, barely visible, was Robin's arm protruding from a small gap. Terror shot through Luffy. With renewed determination, he fought against the water's debilitating effect, joining Gil in clearing the rubble. His rubber limbs, though weakened, could still stretch enough to reach deeper into the pile. Together, they created an opening large enough for Robin to squeeze through. Her face was pale but determined, clutching something tightly to her chest as she emerged. Gil immediately took charge, grabbing both Robin and Luffy and kicking powerfully toward the exit. Nami led the way, navigating the confusing tunnel network until finally, blessedly, they broke through to open water and began their ascent. When they finally surfaced beside the ship, hands reached down to pull them aboard. Luffy collapsed on the deck, gasping as Usopp removed the glass bubble from his head. "Robin," he managed between breaths. "Is she?" "I'm fine," Robin assured him, though she looked anything but. Her clothes were torn, and blood seeped from a gash on her forehead. Nevertheless, she maintained her grip on the object she'd recovered, a small stone cube, similar in design to a poneglyph but only the size of a large book. "What happened down there?" Ace demanded as Gil explained how the cave had partially collapsed just as Robin discovered the artifact. "The structure was unstable," Nami reported. "Probably has been since the Buster Call bombarded the island. We're lucky we made it out at all." Robin sat up slowly, still clutching the stone cube. "It was worth the risk." Her voice trembled with a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. "This is what we were meant to find." They gathered around as she placed the artifact on the deck. Unlike the massive poneglyphs they had seen before, this miniature version appeared designed for mobility. Its surface was covered with the same indecipherable symbols. "Can you read it?" Luffy asked, kneeling beside Robin. She nodded, tracing the symbols with reverent fingers. "It's a key. A key to understanding all poneglyphs." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "During the Void Century, the scholars of the Great Kingdom created the poneglyphs to preserve their history, knowing their civilization was about to fall. But they feared the knowledge might be misused, so they created this, a cipher that explains how to interpret the most dangerous information. Like the ancient weapons," Ace guessed. "Yes, but it's more than that." Robin's eyes shone with the magnitude of their discovery. "This explains why the world government is so desperate to erase this history. The Great Kingdom wasn't just defeated, it was systematically erased from history because of what it represented." "Which was what?" Zoro pressed. Robin looked up, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "Freedom. True freedom." They had discovered something the 20 kings who formed the world government couldn't control, something that would have made their rule impossible. "What?" Luffy asked, captivated. "I don't know yet," Robin admitted. "This cipher only provides part of the answer. To learn the full truth, we would need to find and decode specific poneglyphs mentioned here, starting with one hidden on an island called Laugh Tale." "Laugh Tale?" Ace's expression changed to one of stunned recognition. That's the final island in the Grand Line. The place where the One Piece is said to be hidden." Luffy's eyes widened. "One Piece? You mean the Pirate King's treasure?" "The greatest treasure in the world," Nami breathed, suddenly much more interested in their archaeological discovery. Robin nodded. "According to this, Gold Roger wasn't just a pirate seeking treasure. He discovered the truth about the Void Century, he learned what the world government has been hiding for 800 years. A profound silence fell over the deck as they processed the implications. The historical mystery Robin had dedicated her life to solving was somehow connected to the legendary treasure that had launched the Great Pirate Era. Luffy stood up slowly, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his straw hat. "So to find the truth about history, we need to reach Laugh Tale." Yes, Robin confirmed. But no one has managed that since Gold Roger himself. The journey requires navigating the entire Grand Line, collecting special compasses called road poneglyphs, and facing the most dangerous territories in the world. Not to mention, Ace added, every powerful entity in the world is seeking the One Piece. The Marines, the Yonko, countless pirate crews, all converging on the same goal. Luffy's face suddenly split into a brilliant grin. Sounds like the greatest adventure ever. His enthusiasm was infectious, causing even Robin to smile despite her exhaustion. So what now, Captain? Gil asked, recognizing the familiar determination in Luffy's expression. Luffy looked at each of them in turn, his brother Ace, the swordsman Zoro, the marksman Usopp, the navigator Nami, the fishman Gil, and the archaeologist Robin. People who had chosen to follow him for their own reasons, united now by a common discovery and a shared purpose. Now, he declared, we become more than just troublemakers fighting against the world government. Now we have a real goal. He placed his hand on the stone cipher. We're going to find the truth they've been hiding, and we're going to share it with the world. That makes us targets for every powerful force on the seas, Nami pointed out. The Admirals won't be the only ones hunting us. Good. Luffy's grin widened. More interesting opponents to fight. Zoro smirked. I'm in. This sounds like a path to the strongest swordsman in the world. The treasures we'll find along the way. Nami's eyes gleamed with berry symbols. The great Captain Usopp never backs down from the ultimate adventure. Despite his trembling knees, Usopp struck a heroic pose. I followed you this far, Gil shrugged. Might as well see it through. Robin looked at Luffy with newfound respect. You understand what you're committing to? The world government will use everything in their power to stop us. Let them try, Luffy replied. I've been trained by the 3 strongest Marines in the world. I know their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they think. His expression hardened. And more importantly, I know what they're afraid of, the truth we're going to find. Ace watched his brother with a mixture of pride and concern. Luffy, this puts you directly in opposition to not just the Marines, but potentially Whitebeard and the other Yonko as well. Then I'll have to become stronger than all of them, Luffy stated simply. The conviction in his voice made it sound not like boasting, but like a simple statement of fact, a decision already made, a future already claimed. Well then, Ace laughed, clapping his brother on the shoulder. I guess I'd better help you get started. Whitebeard should know about this anyway, he might even become an ally. As the sun set over the ruined island of O'Hara, the small crew began preparations to sail. Their course was set not just for the next island, but toward a goal that would challenge the very foundations of the world. Luffy stood at the bow, watching the stars emerge over the darkening sea. The path ahead would test everything he had learned, from the admirals who had trained him, from the 4 years of freedom that followed, and from the new friends who had chosen to stand beside him. For the first time since leaving Marine headquarters, he felt the full weight of his straw hat, the promise it represented, not just to Shanks, but to himself. To become strong enough to change the world. One Piece, he whispered to the night sky. The truth about history. Freedom for everyone. His hands tightened on the railing. I'm coming for all of it. Behind him, Robin approached quietly. Captain, there's one more thing you should know about the cipher. What's that? It mentions a man with the initial D in his name, someone who will carry the will of the ancient kingdom and challenge the gods themselves. She paused meaningfully. Monkey D. Luffy. Your very name marks you as part of this struggle. Luffy turned to her, his expression curious. What does the D mean? Robin smiled mysteriously. That's part of what we're going to find out. As they sailed away from O'Hara, leaving the ruined island to its solemn rest, Luffy felt as though he'd crossed an invisible threshold. The training he had received from the Admirals had prepared him for this moment in ways none of them had intended. The skills they had taught him to enforce their vision of justice would now be used to challenge it. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to mold him into the perfect Marine, they had created their perfect adversary, someone who understood their strengths and weaknesses from the inside, who had absorbed their techniques but rejected their philosophies. Luffy placed his straw hat firmly on his head, gazing toward the horizon where adventure awaited. "Let's go," he said to his crew. "Our real journey starts now." Chapter 3, Admiral of Freedom. The massive galleon cut through the Grand Line waves like they were nothing, its black sails emblazoned with a distinctive emblem, a skull wearing a straw hat. The ship, christened Liberty Dawn, represented everything the world government had come to fear over the past 2 years. On the forecastle deck, 19-year-old Monkey D. Luffy stood with his arms crossed, the sea breeze tousling his hair beneath his treasured straw hat. His lean frame had filled out with hard muscle, and a new scar ran across his chest, a souvenir from a battle with a certain magma-wielding admiral. "2 Marine battleships at 3 o'clock, Captain." Usopp called from the crow's nest, his specialized goggles zoomed to maximum distance. "They've spotted us." Luffy didn't even turn his head. "Frankie, ready the coup to burst. Nami, plot us a course directly to Sabaody. Zoro, Sanji, battle stations, just in case." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. In 2 years, what had started as a ragtag group of misfits had evolved into a formidable force. The Liberty Dawn was no ordinary vessel, it was a marvel of engineering created by their shipwright Frankie, capable of outrunning or outfighting almost anything on the seas. "Marines are signaling," Robin reported, stepping up beside Luffy with a spyglass. "They're ordering us to heave to for boarding." A small smile played across Luffy's lips. "How polite of them to ask." "What do you think, Robin?" She returned his smile with a knowing look. "I think we'd be poor revolutionaries if we started following orders now." "My thoughts exactly." Luffy turned to their newest crew member, a tall skeleton in a suit who somehow managed to look elegant despite being literally nothing but bones. "Brooke. How about some traveling music?" "Yo-ho-ho-ho. Coming right up, Captain." The skeletal musician lifted his violin and began playing a jaunty, defiant tune that carried across the deck. "All hands brace for coup de burst." Frankie's voice boomed from below. 3, 2, 1. The ship's stern erupted with concentrated force, sending the Liberty Dawn rocketing forward and skipping across the water's surface. The marine vessels shrank rapidly in the distance, their cannon fire falling pathetically short. Super escape. Frankie emerged from below deck, striking his signature pose with massive forearms connected. The cyborg shipwright had been a crucial addition to their crew, both for his engineering genius and his unwavering loyalty to their cause. Luffy laughed as they soared through the air, the exhilaration of freedom never growing old. 2 years had changed everything, and nothing. He was still chasing adventure, still defying the world government, still protecting his friends. But now he did it with purpose, with direction, and with growing support from across the world. When they finally splashed down, miles from their pursuers, the crew relaxed somewhat. Robin joined Luffy at the railing, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "You seem contemplative today," she observed. Luffy nodded. "Big day tomorrow. 2 years of work coming together. Having second thoughts?" There was no judgment in her question, only genuine interest. "Nope." Luffy's answer came without hesitation. "Just making sure I'm ready." Rayleigh said Sabaody would be crawling with Marines and Cypher Pole agents. "We're walking into the hornet's nest." Robin's hand found his on the railing, her fingers intertwining with his. It was a small gesture, but significant. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past 2 years, from mutual respect to something deeper neither felt the need to define with words. "We've faced worse odds," she reminded him. "And we're not alone this time." Luffy squeezed her hand gently. "I know. Just hope everyone makes it to the meeting point on time." Their plan had been months in the making, a summit of like-minded groups opposed to the world government's corruption, gathering secretly on Sabaody Archipelago. Representatives from the Revolutionary Army, independent kingdoms, and even some rogue marine factions had agreed to attend. If successful, it would create the first unified resistance in history. Whitebeard's crew confirmed this morning, Robin said. Marco will represent them since Whitebeard himself is still recovering. And my father? Luffy still found it strange to use the word. Dragon will be there. Robin's voice held absolute certainty. This alliance was his idea as much as yours. The past 2 years had brought Luffy face to face with his mysterious father, the leader of the Revolutionary Army. Their first meeting had been awkward, two men who shared blood but nothing of history. Yet they'd found common ground in their opposition to the world government, and a grudging respect had formed between them. Captain. Nami's voice cut through their conversation. We've got a problem. Luffy and Robin hurried to the navigation room, where Nami stood over her charts with a den mushi beside her. What's wrong? Luffy asked. Message from Koala, Nami explained, referring to their Revolutionary Army contact. Admiral Akainu arrived at Sabaody this morning with a full fleet. Luffy's expression darkened. Ahead of schedule. That's not all, Nami continued. He's set up checkpoints at every entry to the archipelago. They're checking everyone's identification. They know about the summit, Robin concluded grimly. Luffy paced the small room, mind racing through options. This wasn't entirely unexpected, security leaks happened even with the best precautions, but Akainu's presence complicated everything. The Admiral had a personal vendetta against Luffy ever since their last encounter had left the Marine with a distinctive scar across his torso, matching the one he'd given Luffy. We need to warn the others, he decided. Anyone who hasn't arrived yet should delay until we can secure a safe entry point. And us? Robin asked. Luffy's face split into a determined grin. We go in anyway. A few checkpoints won't stop us. Nami groaned. I was afraid you'd say that. Gather everyone in the gallery. Time to adjust our plans. The crew assembled around the large dining table that had hosted countless meals and strategy sessions. All 9 members of Luffy's inner circle were present, each bringing unique skills to their cause. Zoro, the swordsman, had grown even more formidable over the past 2 years. 3 swords at his hip and a perpetual scowl that broke only for his closest friends. His loyalty to Luffy was absolute, forged in countless battles. Nami, their navigator and finance manager, whose weather prediction abilities had saved them more times than they could count. Her dream of mapping the world had expanded to include freeing it. Usopp, the sharpshooter, whose cowardice had gradually transformed into calculated caution. His ingenious weapons had become legendary, with marine bounty posters specifically warning about his pop green ammunition. Sanji, the chef with the lethal legs, whose food kept them strong and whose fighting abilities cleared their path. He'd joined after Luffy helped free him from his family's political entanglements. Chopper, the reindeer doctor, small in stature but enormous in medical expertise. His ability to transform between multiple forms made him both a gifted healer and a powerful combatant. Robin, the archaeologist whose knowledge of history had become the intellectual foundation of their movement. Her ability to grow additional limbs from any surface made her a formidable spy and fighter. Frankie, the cyborg shipwright whose technological innovations gave them a crucial edge against marine vessels. His body modifications continued to evolve, each more outlandish but effective than the last. Brook, the skeletal musician who had joined them after Luffy helped break the curse that had trapped him in the Florian Triangle. His soul-based powers complemented his masterful swordsmanship. And finally Gil, the loyal fishman who had been with Luffy from the beginning. He had become their underwater specialist and a crucial diplomat with the fishman communities throughout the Grand Line. Alright, listen up, Luffy began, unusually serious. Sabaody is locked down tight. Akainu's there personally with a fleet. That bastard, Sanji muttered, lighting a cigarette. Still holding a grudge from Marineford, I take it. Luffy nodded grimly. The battle at Marineford 2 years ago had been a turning point, an attempt to rescue Ace from execution that had succeeded at terrible cost. While they'd saved his brother's life, many allies had fallen, and both Luffy and Whitebeard had barely survived their confrontations with Akainu. "He wants me dead more than anything," Luffy acknowledged. "But we're still going in. The summit is too important." "With all due respect, Captain," Nami interjected, "this seems unnecessarily risky. We could relocate the meeting." Luffy shook his head. "No time. Most of the delegates are already there, hiding in safe houses. And Rayleigh says the Marines are systematically searching the archipelago. It's only a matter of time before they're found. So we're staging a rescue and hosting a revolutionary summit simultaneously," Zoro summarized, a hint of excitement in his voice. "While an admiral and his fleet try to kill us. Sounds like a typical Tuesday." Despite the tension, laughter broke out around the table. This was who they were, people who faced impossible odds with a smile and unwavering determination. "We'll split into teams," Luffy continued. "Nami, Robin, and Brook will locate and secure our allies. Zoro, Sanji, and Frankie will create a diversion on the far side of the archipelago. Chopper, Usopp, and Gil will prepare our backup escape route through the underwater current. I'll deal with Akainu if necessary." "Alone?" Chopper squeaked, his medical instincts immediately concerned. "Luffy, last time you fought him, last time was different," Luffy cut him off. "I'm stronger now. We all are." The determination in his voice silenced further objections. Over the past 2 years, Luffy's growth had been extraordinary. Building on the foundation laid by the 3 admirals who trained him, he had developed fighting techniques that combined their strengths while eliminating their weaknesses. From Aokiji, he had mastered strategic patience and defensive maneuvers. From Kizaru, blinding speed and unpredictability. From Akainu, overwhelming offensive power and unbreakable resolve. All channeled through his unique rubber abilities and enhanced with increasingly sophisticated haki. "We reach Sabaody by nightfall," Luffy concluded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be intense." As the crew dispersed to prepare, Robin remained behind, studying Luffy carefully. "You didn't tell them everything," she observed once they were alone. Luffy sighed. "No point worrying them more. If Akainu's there, the other admirals might be too." "All 3 of your former mentors, reunited," Robin mused. "Are you ready to face them together if necessary?" Instead of answering directly, Luffy's mind drifted to a memory from his training days. 13-year-old Luffy stood in the center of the training ground, facing the 3 admirals simultaneously for the first time. This wasn't a scheduled exercise, he had provoked it by questioning Akainu's handling of pirate prisoners in front of the other admirals. "The boy needs to learn respect," Akainu had growled, magma dripping from his clenched fists. "Perhaps," Aokiji had replied lazily. "Or perhaps he needs to learn discernment. When to fight, when to yield, when to stand firm." A practical lesson, Kizaru had suggested with his usual sing-song voice. "All of us against him. Let's see what he's absorbed from our individual sessions." Now they circled him like predators, each emanating their distinctive elemental power. Ice crystals formed around Akiji's feet. Heat distorted the air near Akainu. Light bent strangely around Kizaru. "Begin," Akainu commanded. The attacks came simultaneously, a wave of magma from the front, ice spears from behind, light beams from above. Certain death for anyone unprepared. But Luffy had been watching, learning, absorbing. With a calm that belied his years, he leapt high, twisting his rubber body between the ice spears while simultaneously stretching an arm to pull himself away from the magma wave. The light beams passed harmlessly through the space he'd occupied a split second earlier. Landing in a crouch, he immediately had to defend against Akainu's follow-up, a direct charge with fists transformed to magma. Instead of dodging again, Luffy remembered Akiji's lessons in redirection. He stepped to the side at the last possible moment, using Akainu's momentum against him while lashing out with a rubber kick aimed at the Admiral's knee. It was a perfect counter, executed flawlessly, except Akainu turned the targeted leg to magma, forcing Luffy to abort the kick or suffer serious burns. Before he could recover, Kizaru appeared behind him in a flash of light, leg extended in a devastating kick. Luffy barely managed to cross his arms to block, the impact still sending him flying across the training ground. He rolled to his feet just in time to see the ground beneath him freezing rapidly, Akiji's area attack spreading outward. Luffy jumped again, but this time Kizaru was ready, intercepting his aerial escape with a barrage of light bullets. Dodging midair stretched even Luffy's rubber abilities to their limit. He twisted, contorted, stretched, but couldn't avoid every shot. Several struck his chest and limbs, eliciting grunts of pain as he crashed back to the frozen ground. The ice beneath him immediately encased his feet and began climbing up his legs. Akainu approached from one side, Kizaru from the other. Lesson over, Akainu stated flatly. You lose. Panic flashed across young Luffy's face, but only for an instant. Then, surprising everyone including himself, he began to laugh. What's so funny, boy? Akainu demanded, clearly irritated. I almost got you, Luffy grinned through his pain. That kick would have connected if you hadn't used your powers. In a real fight, I'd have landed it. A real fight isn't about landing a single hit, Akainu growled. It's about absolute victory. Is it though? Kizaru mused, tilting his head. Sometimes it's about achieving your objective, whatever that may be. And what was your objective here, Luffy? Akiji asked, finally speaking up from where he observed. Luffy's grin widened. To learn. And I did. I saw how you coordinate your attacks. How you cover each other's blind spots. How you force an opponent to defend in ways that make them vulnerable to the next attack. The three admirals exchanged glances, something unspoken passing between them. Release him, Akiji finally said, the ice receding from Luffy's legs. The lesson isn't complete, Akainu objected. On the contrary, Akiji replied. He learned exactly what he needed to. As Luffy rubbed circulation back into his legs, Kizaru leaned down to eye level with him. Remember this feeling, little rubber boy, he tapped Luffy's chest where the light bullets had struck. 3 different powers, 3 different fighting styles, 3 different philosophies, united against you. Formidable, yes. Luffy nodded solemnly. Now imagine, Kizaru continued with his enigmatic smile, if someone could combine all 3 approaches into a single fighting style. Wouldn't that be something? The suggestion lingered in Luffy's mind long after the training session ended. A unified approach that took the strengths of each admiral without their weaknesses. It seemed impossible, their philosophies were too contradictory, their techniques too specialized to their unique powers. Yet the seed had been planted. Luffy? Robin's voice brought him back to the present. Where did you go just now? He blinked, the memory fading. Just thinking about a lesson I learned a long time ago. And did it provide any insight for our current situation? Luffy smiled. Yeah, actually. I've been worrying about facing my old mentors together, but that's exactly what made me strong enough to face them now. Robin raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to elaborate. They never agreed on anything, Luffy explained. Justice, strategy, purpose, they were always at odds. But in combat, they worked together perfectly because they understood their individual roles. That's what we've built here too, a crew where everyone has their strengths, and together we're unbeatable. An interesting perspective, Robin mused. Though I suspect Akainu would be insulted by the comparison. Luffy laughed. All the more reason to make it. Sabaody Archipelago glittered in the distance as night fell. The massive mangrove trees with their bubble-producing bark created a distinctive silhouette against the darkening sky. Under normal circumstances, the archipelago would be alive with activity, a bustling hub for travelers preparing to enter the new world. But even from a distance, they could see it was different now. Marine battleships encircled the entire area, searchlights sweeping methodically across the waters. The usually vibrant lights of the entertainment districts were dimmed, replaced by the harsh spotlights of military checkpoints. "They're not taking any chances," Frankie observed from the Liberty Dawn's foredeck. "Must be at least 20 battleships out there. And probably twice as many pacifistas on the ground," Sanji added, referring to the Marines' human weapons modeled after warlord Bartholomew Kuma. Nami studied the scene through a spyglass. "The currents around Grove 13 seem lighter patrolled. We might be able to approach underwater using the coating Rayleigh prepared for us." "Good eye," Luffy approved. "Frankie, take us down before we get within visual range of their lookouts." The Liberty Dawn was unique among ships. Thanks to Frankie's ingenuity and a special resin coating, it could submerge like a submarine for limited periods. This capability had saved them on numerous occasions when conventional escape routes were blocked. As the ship descended beneath the waves, an eerie calm enveloped them. The bubble coating that kept seawater out also muffled sounds, creating an atmosphere of suspended tension. "This is where we separate," Luffy announced as they neared their destination. "Everyone remembers their assignments?" Nods all around. "One addition," he continued. "If you encounter an admiral, do not engage directly. Especially a Kainu. That fight is mine. And if you encounter all three?" Zoro asked bluntly, saying what everyone was thinking. Luffy's expression remained confident. "Then they'd better have learned some new tricks in the past 6 years, because I sure have." The teams disembarked at different points around Grove 13, using small bubble-coated vessels to reach their designated areas undetected. Luffy went alone, despite Robin's obvious concern. "I'll be fine," he assured her before they parted. "Focus on finding the delegates. I'll meet you at Shaki's bar by midnight." She nodded, but caught his hand before he could leave. "Don't take unnecessary risks. The movement needs you alive." What went unsaid hung between them. "I need you alive." "I promise," he replied softly, squeezing her hand before releasing it. The cool night air greeted Luffy as he emerged from the water onto one of Sabaedy's less populated groves. The massive mangrove roots provided excellent cover as he made his way toward the center of the archipelago. His goal, reconnaissance of the Marine Command Center they had established at Grove 1. Years of training under Akiji had taught Luffy the value of information before action. He needed to confirm Akainu's presence personally and assess the full extent of the Marine deployment before deciding how to proceed. Moving through the shadows with a stealth that would have impressed his former mentors, Luffy avoided the regular patrols and checkpoints. His observation haki, honed to extraordinary sensitivity, allowed him to sense approaching threats well before they appeared. As he neared Grove 1, the Marine presence intensified dramatically. Uniformed soldiers marched in tight formations. Pacifistas stood at regular intervals, their expressionless faces scanning for intruders. And at the center of it all, a massive pavilion had been erected, clearly the command headquarters. Luffy found a vantage point in the high branches of an adjacent mangrove, using his rubber abilities to stretch into position without disturbing the foliage. From there, he had a clear view into the pavilion through its open sides. What he saw made his blood run cold. Not just Akainu, but all three admirals were gathered around a tactical table, studying what appeared to be a map of Sabaody. Akainu's perpetual scowl was more pronounced than ever as he jabbed a finger at various points on the map. Akiji stood with his typical slouch, hands in pockets, occasionally offering a comment that seemed to irritate Akainu further. And Kizaru lounged in a chair, his enigmatic smile firmly in place as he observed the tension between his colleagues. "The summit will be in one of these 3 locations," Akainu was saying, his deep voice carrying to Luffy's position. "We'll hit all of them simultaneously when we get confirmation. And create mass civilian casualties in the process," Akiji noted dryly. "Very subtle, Sakazuki. Collateral damage is acceptable when dealing with revolution," Akainu retorted. "These people harbor criminals against the world government. Most of them are just trying to survive, Kizaru mused. Such a heavy-handed approach seems inelegant. Akainu slammed his fist on the table, small droplets of magma spattering from his knuckles. I didn't request your input on tactics, Borsellino. The Fleet Admiral gave me full authority for this operation. Indeed he did, Akiji acknowledged. Though one wonders why, given your personal vendetta against Straw Hat Luffy. The mention of his name drew Luffy's complete attention. My history with the boy is precisely why I understand the threat he represents, Akainu growled. He was trained by us, he knows our techniques, our strategies. And now he's using that knowledge against us, gathering revolutionaries and pirates into some misguided alliance. Rather impressive, don't you think? Kizaru remarked casually. Our little rubber student building his own power base to rival the Marines. It's treason of the highest order, Akainu snapped. And when I find him, his execution will serve as an example to anyone else considering defiance. If you find him, Akiji corrected. Luffy was never easy to contain, even as a child. Now, with the resources at his disposal, we have an advantage he doesn't expect, Akainu cut him off, a cruel smile twisting his features. Bring in the prisoner. Luffy's heart nearly stopped as a side door opened and Marines escorted a bound figure into the pavilion. Long dark hair fell over the prisoner's face, but Luffy would recognize that silhouette anywhere. Robin. But how? She had left with Nami and Brook less than an hour ago. Unless, we captured her attempting to make contact with Revolutionary Army agents in Grove 22, a Marine officer reported. She was separated from her companions during the ensuing battle. Luffy's mind raced. Grove 22 was nowhere near their planned route. Had Robin gone off mission? Or was this some kind of trap? Akainu approached Robin, roughly lifting her chin to look at her face. Nico Robin. The demon child. After 20 years, you finally face justice for your crimes against the world government. Robin's response was to spit directly in the Admiral's face. The pavilion went silent. Akainu slowly wiped the saliva from his cheek, his expression darkening dangerously as magma began to flow down his arm. Your defiance changes nothing, he said, voice deadly calm. You're bait now. Straw Hat will come for you, and when he does, both of you will die. Perhaps, Robin replied, her voice steady despite her situation. But not before he makes you regret this decision. Akainu raised his hand, clearly intending to strike her. But before he could, Akiji stepped forward. She's more valuable unharmed, Sakazuki, he said firmly. If your goal is to draw out Straw Hat, a beaten prisoner won't accomplish that. Akainu hesitated, then lowered his hand with obvious reluctance. Take her to the holding cells. Triple the guard and have stone restraints secured to her at all times. As Robin was led away, Luffy fought every instinct screaming at him to charge in immediately. The old Luffy might have done exactly that, rushing in without a plan, driven purely by emotion. But years of experience had taught him the value of strategic patience, particularly when the stakes were this high. Robin was alive. Not unharmed, judging by the bruises visible on her face, but alive. And the Admiral's conversation had revealed they didn't know the exact location of the summit yet. There was still time to adjust their plans. With practiced stealth, Luffy retreated from his observation point. His mind worked furiously, processing what he'd learned and formulating a new strategy. The presence of all three admirals changed everything. This wasn't just a security operation anymore, it was a deliberate trap set by his former mentors. He needed to warn the others. He needed to rescue Robin. And somehow, he needed to ensure the summit happened regardless of the Marine presence. As he made his way back toward their rendezvous point, Luffy tapped into the communication network Frankie had established, a system of specially modified Den Mushi that allowed secure contact between team members. Change of plans, he said tersely once he'd confirmed the connection. Robin's been captured. All three admirals are on site. Proceed to backup location and wait for my signal. Acknowledgements came in quick succession from each team. No questions, no panic, just immediate adaptation to the new information. His crew had come a long way from the disorganized group they'd been 2 years ago. The backup location was an abandoned research facility in Grove 77, formerly owned by Dr. Vegapunk before the Marines consolidated his operations on a single island. Rayleigh had suggested it as an emergency meeting point, knowing its underground laboratories were shielded from surveillance and unlikely to be high on the Marines' search list. Luffy arrived to find Nami and Brook already there, both looking tense. "What happened?" he demanded. "Robin was supposed to be with you." "We got separated during a patrol sweep," Nami explained, still catching her breath. "She said she'd spotted a Revolutionary Army contact and was going to make a quick detour. She told us to continue to the safe house and she'd catch up. Only she never did," Brook added somberly. "We feared the worst, but had no way to confirm until your message." "Damn it," Luffy muttered. It was unlike Robin to take such risks without informing him first. Something about this didn't add up. One by one, the other teams arrived. Zoro, Sanji, and Frankie had successfully created their diversion, drawing significant Marine forces to the far side of Sabaody. Chopper, Usopp, and Gil had secured their underwater escape route, though they reported increased patrols near all water access points. "So what's the new plan, Captain?" Zoro asked, getting straight to the point as usual. Luffy paced the dusty laboratory floor. "Two priorities: rescue Robin and ensure the summit happens. We need to split up again. The Admirals will be expecting a rescue attempt," Sanji pointed out. "They'll have every approach to the holding cells covered." "Good," Luffy replied with a dangerous smile. "Let them focus on that while we move the summit delegates right under their noses. You want to hold the Revolutionary Summit with all 3 Admirals present on Sabaody?" Usopp's voice rose in pitch with each word. "That's insane even by our standards." "Not on Sabaody," Luffy clarified. "Under it." He pointed to the schematics of the research facility displayed on a wall screen. "This place extends deep beneath the archipelago. The lower levels connect to a network of natural caves created by the mangrove roots. According to these plans, that network stretches across multiple groves. Including Grove 1, where the Marine headquarters is currently located," Frankie realized, studying the schematics with newfound interest. "Exactly," Luffy confirmed. "While most of you escort the delegates here through the root system, I'll use the same network to infiltrate the Marine base from below and rescue Robin." "By yourself?" Chopper squeaked in alarm. "Against 3 Admirals. I won't engage them directly unless absolutely necessary," Luffy assured him. "This is a stealth mission." The crew exchanged skeptical glances. Stealth and Luffy were not words they typically associated with each other. "I can do subtle when I need to," Luffy insisted, correctly interpreting their expressions. "Besides, they'll be expecting a frontal assault. The last thing they'll anticipate is me coming up through the floor." After further discussion and refinement, the plan was set. Nami, Usopp, Gil, and Chopper would guide the delegates through the route network to the facility. Zoro, Sanji, Frankie, and Brook would create a series of diversions to keep Marine attention focused away from both the facility and the holding cells. And Luffy would attempt the seemingly impossible, a solo extraction of Robin from the heart of Marine territory. As the crew prepared to move out, Zoro pulled Luffy aside. "You're not telling us everything," the swordsman said bluntly. "What's really going on with Robin?" Luffy hesitated, then sighed. "Something feels off about her capture. It was too convenient, too perfectly timed." "You think she got caught on purpose?" "Maybe. Or maybe." Luffy didn't finish the thought, but his expression darkened. "Just focus on the diversions. And if you don't hear from me by dawn, get everyone out through the underwater route." Zoro's eye narrowed. "That sounds like a contingency for failure." "Not like you." Just being prepared, Luffy replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Akiji taught me that. The underwater route network was a maze of twisting passages, dimly illuminated by bioluminescent organisms that clung to the gnarled wood. Luffy moved quickly but cautiously, consulting the crude map Rayleigh had provided. According to the old pirate, who knew Sabaody better than almost anyone, the archipelago had been used for centuries by those wishing to avoid official attention. Pirates, revolutionaries, escaped slaves, all had utilized the hidden passages beneath the mangrove trees to move unseen across the islands. After nearly an hour of navigation, Luffy found what he was looking for, a root formation that curved upward, disappearing into the ceiling of the passage. The map indicated this should emerge in a storage area adjacent to the marine holding cells. Using his rubber abilities, Luffy stretched upward, feeling carefully for any opening. His fingers found an edge where the massive root penetrated the stone foundation of the building above. With controlled strength, he widened the gap just enough to squeeze through. He emerged in a dimly lit storage room filled with crates of marine supplies. Focusing his observation haki, he detected several presences nearby, guards stationed in the hallway outside and, further away, a cluster of stronger auras that likely included the Admirals. And there, in what must be the holding area, a single, familiar aura, Robin. Luffy moved silently to the door and listened. Two guards stood outside, chatting in low voices. Overkill if you ask me. 3 admirals for one summit. It's not the summit, idiot. It's Straw Hat they want. After what he did at Marineford, still, triple guard on one prisoner. She's just an archaeologist. An archaeologist who's probably the most dangerous woman in the world, according to HQ. Besides, she's Straw Hat's woman. He'll come for her. And get captured himself. Almost seems too easy. Nothing's easy with that rubber freak. I heard he nearly killed Admiral Akainu 2 years ago. Bullshit. Nobody goes toe-to-toe with the Red Dog and lives. Luffy had heard enough. The guards were alert but overconfident, a combination he could exploit. Drawing on Kizaru's lessons in misdirection, he picked up a small crate and tossed it to the far corner of the storeroom. It landed with a satisfying crash. What was that? One guard's voice sharpened. Probably just rats. This place is ancient. Better check it out anyway. Akainu will have our asses if anything goes wrong. The storeroom door opened slowly, one guard cautiously peering inside with weapon drawn. The moment he stepped through, Luffy struck, a rubber hand clamped over the guard's mouth while another swift blow to the neck rendered him unconscious. The second guard, noticing his companion's silence, started to call out. Hey, you okay in there? He never finished the sentence as Luffy's stretching leg swept his feet from under him. A quick chop to the back of the neck and both guards were out cold. Luffy dragged them into the storeroom, tied them up with their own belts, and gagged them with strips torn from their uniforms. Then, donning one guard's cap and jacket, he stepped into the corridor. The holding area was just ahead, a reinforced door with a small observation window. Through it, Luffy could see Robin sitting on a bench, hands bound with sea stone cuffs. Her head was bowed, dark hair obscuring her face. The lock was substantial but simple, designed to keep people in, not particularly concerned with keeping rescuers out. Using a small tool Nami had insisted he carry, Luffy picked it with surprising dexterity. The door swung open silently. Robin looked up, her eyes widening fractionally before her expression settled back into careful neutrality. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Probably not, Luffy agreed, approaching to examine her restraints. But when has that ever stopped me? Luffy, listen to me. Robin's voice took on an urgent quality. This is a trap. They're expecting you. I know, he replied calmly, working on the sea stone cuffs. 3 admirals, dozens of high-ranking officers, and pacifistas surrounding the building. Did I miss anything? A small smile touched Robin's lips despite the situation. Always so confident. I learn from the best. The cuffs clicked open, releasing Robin's wrists. Can you walk? The exit is, through the root system, yes. Robin stood, rubbing circulation back into her hands. But Luffy, there's something else you need to know. Something I discovered before I was captured. The seriousness in her tone made him pause. What is it? The world government knows about Laugh Tale. They've always known. The coordinates, the route, everything the poneglyphs have been hiding. Luffy frowned in confusion. Then why all the secrecy? Why destroy O'Hara? Why hunt you down for all these years? Because what's on Laugh Tale isn't a weapon or treasure in the traditional sense. It's knowledge, knowledge that would destroy the very foundation of their power. Robin's eyes burned with intensity. I managed to decode part of the message from the cipher we found at O'Hara. It speaks of a truth so dangerous that those who built the world government were willing to erase an entire century of history to conceal it. What kind of truth could be that dangerous? Before Robin could answer, an alarm blared throughout the facility. They had been discovered. We need to move, Luffy said urgently, taking Robin's hand. We can talk about this once we're safe. They raced back to the storeroom and the root passage below. As they reached it, the building shook with a massive impact, one of the diversions his crew had planned, right on schedule. Ladies first, Luffy grinned, gesturing to the opening. Robin slipped through with practiced agility, Luffy right behind her. They had barely entered the passage when a familiar cold sensation swept through the area. Ice began forming along the walls, spreading rapidly toward them. Akiji, Luffy muttered. He must have figured out our escape route. This way, Robin urged, pulling him down a side passage not on their original route. There's another exit that leads to Grove 41. They ran through the twisting root system, the creeping ice always just behind them. Akiji wasn't attacking directly, merely using his powers to herd them in a specific direction. Which meant, it's a funnel, Luffy realized aloud. He's directing us somewhere. Yes, Robin confirmed grimly. Likely toward Akainu or Kizaru. Luffy skidded to a halt, pulling Robin up short beside him. Then we don't go that way. With sudden decisiveness, he punched upward with a hockey-infused fist. The ceiling of roots and soil exploded outward, creating an impromptu exit. In one smooth motion, he wrapped an arm around Robin's waist and stretched his other arm to grab the edge of the new opening, propelling them both upward and out. They emerged in the middle of a bustling Sabaody shopping district, startled civilians scattering in alarm at their explosive appearance. Before anyone could react, Luffy had scooped Robin up and was bounding away across the rooftops. That wasn't very stealthy, Robin observed dryly. Change of plans, Luffy replied, scanning the horizon for pursuers. We need to reach the summit location and warn the delegates. This whole operation has been compromised from the start. How do you figure? The Admirals knew exactly where to look for you. They knew about the route passages. They even seemed to be expecting our rescue attempt. Luffy's expression was uncharacteristically grim. Someone is feeding them information. Robin's face remained carefully neutral. You suspect a traitor among our allies? Or a very convincing infiltrator? Luffy glanced at her briefly before focusing back on their escape route. When exactly did you learn about Laugh Tale and the world government's knowledge of it? The question hung in the air between them as Luffy continued moving across Sabaody's distinctive architecture. You suspect me, Robin stated finally, her voice devoid of emotion. I suspect that the Robin I know wouldn't have taken an unnecessary risk by separating from her team without telling me first, Luffy countered. The Robin I know also wouldn't have been captured so easily, even by Marines. Perhaps you don't know me as well as you think, she replied coolly. Luffy landed on a particularly tall building, setting Robin down as he surveyed the archipelago. Marine forces were mobilizing across multiple groves, clearly responding to their escape. Maybe I don't, he acknowledged, turning to face her directly. So why don't you tell me who you really are? For a moment, Robin's expression remained unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, not her usual smile, but something colder, more calculating. Very perceptive, Straw Hat, she said, her voice subtly altered. Far more than your file suggested. No wonder you've given the world government such trouble. Before Luffy's eyes, Robin began to change. Her height increased slightly, her features shifted, and even her clothing transformed. Where Robin had stood moments before, there now stood a tall man in a dark suit, his face partially hidden by a white mask. CP0, Luffy growled, immediately shifting into a combat stance. The world government's secret weapon. One of them, the agent agreed calmly. I'm impressed you saw through my disguise. The main know me powers are usually quite convincing. Not to someone who knows Robin as well as I do, Luffy replied, anger building inside him. Where is she? What have you done with her? The real Nico Robin is precisely where you think she is, leading your little delegation to your secret summit. The agent straightened his tie casually. We never captured her at all. That was merely bait to separate you from your crew. Relief washed through Luffy, quickly followed by confusion. If this was all to get me alone, you've made a serious miscalculation. Have I? The agent didn't seem concerned. You're now isolated from your allies, your location is being triangulated as we speak, and 3 admirals are converging on this position. He glanced at a watch on his wrist. I estimate you have approximately 3 minutes before they arrive. Plenty of time, Luffy stated, cracking his knuckles. The CP0 agent chuckled. You misunderstand. I'm not here to fight you, merely to delay you. Though I am curious. He tilted his head, studying Luffy with clinical interest. How does it feel to know you're about to face the very men who trained you? The men who made you what you are. They didn't make me, Luffy replied firmly. They tried to mold me into their image of a perfect marine. But everything that defines me, my dreams, my values, my willingness to fight for freedom, those things were mine long before I met them. Inspiring words, the agent mocked. I'm sure they'll make a fine epitaph. With that, he leapt backward off the building, disappearing into the Sabaody crowds below. Luffy didn't pursue him. The agent had been right about one thing, the admirals were indeed approaching. He could sense their distinctive auras moving toward his position from different directions, boxing him in. He had 3 options, run, hide, or fight. The old Luffy might have chosen to fight without hesitation. The Luffy trained by the admirals would have calculated odds and chosen the most strategic retreat. But the Luffy he had become made a different choice entirely. Taking a deep breath, he sat cross-legged on the rooftop and waited. They arrived simultaneously, approaching from 3 directions to surround him completely. Akainu from the north, his perpetual scowl deepened by the scar Luffy had given him at Marineford. Akiji from the east, hands in pockets, expression unreadable behind his sleep mask. Kizaru from the west, yellow suit immaculate as always, that enigmatic smile playing on his lips. No dramatic escape attempt? Akainu asked, clearly suspicious of Luffy's calm demeanor. No rubber acrobatics across the rooftops? What would be the point? Luffy replied, not bothering to stand. You just chase me, endangering civilians in the process. Better to face you directly. How very responsible, Kizaru drawled. Our little student has grown up. He's no student of mine anymore, Akainu growled. Just another pirate to be eliminated. Akiji remained silent, studying Luffy with a calculating gaze. Before we do this, Luffy said, I have a question. Why are you so afraid of the truth about the Void Century? What could possibly be so dangerous that you'd destroy entire islands to keep it hidden? The question clearly caught them off guard. Akainu's scowl deepened, while Kizaru's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. You meddle in matters beyond your understanding, Akainu finally responded. The stability of the world depends on maintaining certain truths and containing certain threats. Containing them, or controlling them? Luffy challenged. The world government doesn't fear chaos, it fears losing power. You speak of things you know nothing about. Akainu's voice dropped dangerously, magma beginning to drip from his clenched fists. I know enough, Luffy replied, finally standing to face his former mentors. I know the three of you serve a system built on lies and fear. I know innocent people suffer while celestial dragons live like gods. I know historians like Robin are hunted down just for asking questions about the past. Such righteous indignation, Kizaru mused. But tell us, Luffy boy, what's your alternative? Anarchy? Pirates ruling the seas? The strong preying on the weak without any check on their power? No, Luffy stated firmly. Freedom. True freedom, where people can live without fear of being enslaved by celestial dragons or executed for questioning the government. Where knowledge isn't suppressed, where power serves people instead of controlling them. Naive idealism, Akainu dismissed. The world doesn't work that way. It could, Luffy insisted. If people like you had the courage to challenge the system instead of enforcing it blindly. A tense silence followed his words. Then, surprisingly, Akiji spoke for the first time. You've changed, Luffy. Matured. The angry boy who left us 6 years ago wouldn't have been capable of this conversation. I had good teachers, Luffy acknowledged with a hint of his usual grin. Even if they didn't always know what they were teaching me. Enough talk, Akainu cut in. You've been declared an enemy of the world government. The sentence is death, to be carried out immediately. The air around them charged with tension as the three admirals prepared to attack. Magma bubbled around Akainu's form. Ice crystals formed at Akiji's feet. Light bent strangely around Kizaru's hands. Luffy didn't shift into a defensive stance. Instead, he closed his eyes briefly, drawing upon techniques he had developed during years of reflection on his training. When his eyes opened, they held a clarity and focus that made even Akainu pause momentarily. I learned something from each of you, Luffy said quietly. Akainu taught me the power of conviction, that unwavering belief in your path gives you strength beyond mere physical capability. He took a step forward, and the rooftop cracked slightly beneath his foot, the subtle application of conqueror's haki that none of them had known he possessed. Akiji showed me the value of strategic patience, that sometimes the most powerful move is choosing when not to strike. The air around him began to shimmer as he activated his gear second, steam rising from his rubber body as his metabolism accelerated. And Kizaru demonstrated that unpredictability is a weapon in itself, that even the strongest opponent can be defeated if they can't anticipate your next move. His arms began to darken with armament haki, the advanced form he had developed that combined elasticity with impenetrable defense. But the most important lesson, he continued, his voice gaining strength, wasn't something any of you taught me directly. It was what I learned by watching you together, that different philosophies can coexist, that opposing viewpoints can complement each other rather than conflict. He spread his arms wide, a gesture that was both challenge and invitation. So here I am. The student facing his teachers. The creation confronting his creators. Let's see if your separate approaches can defeat what I've become by unifying them. For a moment, none of the admirals moved, each assessing the transformed figure before them. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, they attacked simultaneously. Akainu launched a volcanic barrage, great eruption. Sending massive magma fists hurtling toward Luffy from the front. Akiji created an ice field, Ice Age. That rapidly expanded across the rooftop, threatening to freeze Luffy in place. Kizaru disappeared in a flash of light, reappearing above Luffy with leg extended in his devastating light kick, Ameno de Jikara. 6 years ago, this coordinated assault would have overwhelmed Luffy instantly. 3 years ago, at Marineford, he might have survived it briefly before being defeated. But the Luffy who stood before them now was something entirely new. With movements too fast for normal eyes to track, he twisted between the magma fists while simultaneously leaping clear of the advancing ice. As Kizaru's kick descended, Luffy's observation haki allowed him to predict its path perfectly. Instead of dodging, he caught the Admiral's leg with a haki-infused hand, using Kizaru's own momentum to throw him directly into Akainu's path. The yellow Admiral barely managed to transform into light in time to avoid colliding with his colleague's magma form. Gomu Gomu no Jet Gatling. Luffy launched his counterattack, arms blurring as they stretched and retracted with incredible speed, each punch reinforced with haki that could actually make contact with Logia users. The Admirals scattered, momentarily forced on the defensive by the sheer speed and power of Luffy's assault. Buildings around them began to crumble from the shockwaves of their clash. "We need to move this battle away from civilians," Akiji called out, genuine concern in his voice. "Agreed," Luffy replied, surprising them. "Follow me if you can." With that, he leapt from the rooftop, stretching his arm to grab a distant mangrove branch and catapulting himself toward the unpopulated areas of Sabaody. The Admirals pursued, Kizaru taking the lead with his light-speed travel. He intercepted Luffy mid-swing, forcing him to release his handhold and drop toward the ground below. But Luffy had anticipated this. Gomu Gomu no Balloon. His body inflated instantly, bouncing off the ground and ricocheting toward Akiji, who had positioned himself to catch Luffy on the rebound. Ice Saber. The Admiral formed a frozen blade, slashing at Luffy as he approached. Luffy twisted mid-air, narrowly avoiding the blade while stretching his leg for a counter. Gomu Gomu no Jet Stamp. The kick connected solidly with Akiji's chest, sending the Iceman crashing through several empty market stalls. Before Luffy could press his advantage, Akainu emerged from below, the ground melting as magma bubbled up beneath Luffy's feet. Hellhound. Magma formed into the shape of a massive dog's head, jaws snapping toward Luffy with deadly intent. Heat intense enough to melt steel radiated from the construct. Luffy didn't retreat. Instead, drawing on his most advanced technique, he coated both arms with a layer of haki so dense it took on a metallic sheen. Gomu Gomu no Red Hawk. His fist shot forward, igniting through the friction of his accelerated movement. Fire and haki combined as his punch collided with Akainu's magma hound, creating an explosion that rocked the entire grove. When the smoke cleared, all four combatants stood in the center of a smoldering crater. The abandoned area around them was devastated, but no civilian structures had been damaged. "You've surpassed our expectations," Akiji admitted, brushing debris from his uniform. "Combining our techniques like that, it's something none of us considered possible." "Because you were too focused on your differences," Luffy replied, breathing heavily but still ready to continue. "Too convinced your way was the only right one." "There is only one justice," Akainu insisted, though there was a new note in his voice, not quite respect, but perhaps a reluctant acknowledgement of Luffy's growth. "There are as many forms of justice as there are people," Luffy countered. "The mistake is thinking they must compete rather than complement." "Such philosophy from a pirate," Kizaru remarked, adjusting his glasses which had somehow remained perfectly positioned throughout the battle. "Not just a pirate," Luffy corrected. "A revolutionary. Someone fighting for a world where Marines protect people instead of controlling them, where knowledge is shared instead of suppressed, where freedom isn't just a word but a reality." The battle paused as his words hung in the air. For a brief moment, it seemed as though a genuine dialogue might be possible. Then the moment shattered as Den Den Mushi at each Admiral's wrist activated simultaneously. "Admirals, report status," came the terse voice of Fleet Admiral Sengoku. "Have you apprehended Straw Hat?" Akainu reached for his communicator, but before he could respond, a massive explosion rocked the distant Grove 1, the Marine Command Center. "What the?" Akainu began, all three admirals turning toward the plume of smoke rising in the distance. Luffy grinned, recognizing his crew's handiwork. "Looks like your base has a problem. Better check it out." "This is a diversion," Akainu realized, fury contorting his features. "The summit is happening right now," Luffy confirmed. Representatives from kingdoms, revolutionary groups, and even some Marines who remember what justice really means. All gathering to plan a better world. "We'll crush them all," Akainu growled, already moving toward the explosion. "You can try," Luffy called after him. "But the world is changing, Akainu. People are waking up. The truth about the world government, about the void century, about the ancient kingdom, it won't stay buried forever." Akainu paused, turning back with deadly intent. "Then we'll bury it again, along with anyone who spread such dangerous ideas. Like you tried to bury O'Hara?" Luffy's voice hardened. "Like you tried to execute Ace for the crime of being Gold Roger's son? How many more people will you sacrifice to protect a lie?" For a moment, it seemed Akainu might abandon his duties to continue their fight. But another explosion, larger than the first, made the decision for him. "This isn't over, Straw Hat," he promised darkly before transforming partially into magma to move more quickly toward the command center. Kizaru glanced between Luffy and the distant chaos, clearly calculating his options. "Until next time, Luffy boy," with a flash of light, he too departed. Only Akiji remained, regarding Luffy with an unreadable expression. "Why are you still here?" Luffy asked, maintaining his guard. "To give you a head start," Akiji replied simply. "What you said about justice, it's not entirely wrong." Luffy's eyes widened in surprise. "You believe that? Then why stay with the Marines?" "Because change sometimes needs to come from within." Akiji adjusted his sleep mask. "Not all of us agree with Akainu's methods, even among the highest ranks. You could join us," Luffy offered. "We could use someone with your perspective." Akiji actually smiled at that. "Still making snap judgments about who to trust, I see." He turned to leave, then paused. "One piece of advice, former student to former teacher, watch your back around the revolutionary leadership. Not all of them share your idealistic view of freedom." Before Luffy could question him further, Akiji transformed into ice and departed, leaving Luffy alone in the devastated battlefield. He didn't waste time pondering the cryptic warning. His crew needed him, and the summit was still vulnerable despite their precautions. Using his Den Mushi, Luffy contacted Nami. "Status report." "Summit proceeding as planned," came her terse reply. "But Marines are regrouping. We need to wrap this up within the hour." "On my way," Luffy confirmed, already moving toward their hidden location. "Any word from Robin?" "She's fine. Currently presenting evidence about the Void Century to the delegates. It's causing quite a stir." Luffy smiled despite his exhaustion. Of course Robin would seize this opportunity to share her life's research with those who could actually use it to effect change. He reached the research facility just as another round of explosions rocked the Marine base, the final phase of their distraction plan, courtesy of Frankie's specialized explosives timed to detonate in sequence. Inside, the abandoned laboratories had been transformed into a makeshift conference center. Representatives from at least a dozen kingdoms sat alongside Revolutionary Army commanders and even a few disguised Marines, all listening intently as Robin stood before a large screen displaying images of various poneglyphs. Conclusive evidence that the world government was founded not as a peaceful coalition, but as a conspiracy among 20 kings to erase a competing civilization from history, she was saying as Luffy slipped in quietly through a side entrance. He caught her eye briefly, and the relief in her expression was palpable. She continued without missing a beat. "The ancient kingdom possessed technology and philosophy far beyond anything we have today. They believed in absolute freedom, not anarchy, but a system where power was distributed rather than concentrated, where knowledge was the birthright of all people, not a tool of control. And the world government destroyed them for this?" asked a representative Luffy recognized as the Princess of Alabasta, Vivi Nefertari. "Yes," Robin confirmed. "The 20 kings feared this philosophy would undermine their authority. So they formed an alliance, systematically eliminated the ancient kingdom, and then, most chillingly, erased all record of their existence from history. This is why the study of the Void Century is forbidden, added Dragon, Luffy's father, who stood near the back of the assembly. The truth would delegitimize the very foundation of the world government's authority. Murmurs rippled through the gathered delegates as they processed this information. We have limited time, Luffy announced, stepping forward. Marine forces will regroup soon. We need concrete action plans, not just information sharing. The discussion shifted to practical matters, alliance formations, communication networks, safe havens for those opposing world government tyranny. Within the hour, the framework for a unified resistance had been established, with representatives returning to their respective territories to begin implementation. As the summit concluded and delegates departed through various secret exits, Robin approached Luffy. You faced all three admirals, she stated, her eyes examining him for injuries. And yet here you stand. They taught me well, Luffy replied with a tired smile. Too well, maybe. What happened? We fought. We talked. And I think maybe I made them question things, at least a little. He recounted his conversation with Akiji specifically. Robin listened thoughtfully. Interesting. Internal division among the admirals could work to our advantage. That's your takeaway? Luffy laughed. Not, I'm glad you survived, or amazing job beating three admirals. Both of those are given, Robin replied with a small smile, placing a hand gently on his cheek. I never doubted you would return. The moment was interrupted by Zoro's arrival. Hate to break up the reunion, but we've got confirmation that marine reinforcements are inbound. Time to disappear. The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with crew members escorting the last delegates through various escape routes. Luffy, Robin, and Zoro were among the final group to leave, ensuring nothing was left behind that might identify their allies. As they made their way through the underwater passage back toward their ship, Luffy felt a strange mixture of emotions, pride in what they had accomplished, concern for the battles ahead, but above all, a sense of rightness. This was the path he was meant to follow, not the one the Marines had tried to force upon him. You know, he said to Robin as they walked, when I was training with the Admirals, they told me they were preparing me to uphold justice and protect the world. And now you're fighting against everything they stand for, she observed. Not everything, Luffy corrected. Just their methods, their secrets, their control. The goal is still the same, a world where people can live freely, without fear. I just have a different idea of how to get there. The students are passing the teachers, Zoro commented from ahead. Or maybe just taking a different lesson from the same teaching, Luffy replied thoughtfully. They reached the Liberty Dawn without incident, finding the rest of the crew already aboard and preparations for departure underway. Mission accomplished, Captain. Usopp reported proudly. Summit completed, alliances formed, and all delegates safely away. And we got some fantastic intelligence from our revolutionary friends, Nami added, waving a folder of documents. Including the locations of 3 marine weapons facilities we can target next. Luffy nodded in approval but found himself strangely pensive as they cast off, the ship submerging to avoid detection as they left Sabaody behind. Later that evening, as the crew celebrated their success with a feast prepared by Sanji, Luffy slipped away to the quiet of the observation deck. The underwater view was mesmerizing, bioluminescent creatures drifting through the darkness, occasional glimpses of larger sea kings in the distance. Robin found him there, as she often did when he sought solitude. Having second thoughts, she asked, echoing her question from earlier. No, Luffy replied honestly. Just thinking about paths not taken. You mean if you had remained with the Marines? Sometimes I wonder what kind of Marine I would have become, he admitted. If I would have ended up like Akainu, blindly following orders, or like Akiji, questioning from within. I think, Robin said carefully, you would have broken the mold entirely. Just as you're doing now. She joined him at the railing, their shoulders touching comfortably. When I was a child, she continued, running from the world government, I never imagined I would find allies, let alone. She paused, seemingly searching for the right word. Family? Luffy suggested. She smiled. Yes. Family. They stood in companionable silence, watching the underwater world drift by. What happens next? Robin eventually asked. After today, the world government will redouble their efforts to stop us. Let them try, Luffy replied with his characteristic grin. We keep moving forward. We find the road poneglyphs. We locate Laugh Tale. We discover the truth about the Void Century and the Ancient Kingdom. And then we share it with everyone. The greatest treasure in the world, knowledge that could topple an empire, Robin mused. No wonder they fear us. They should, Luffy agreed. Because unlike Gold Roger, who found the truth but kept it hidden, we're going to make sure everyone knows what the world government has been hiding all these centuries. As if to punctuate his declaration, the Liberty Dawn began to ascend, breaking through to the surface world once more. Moonlight spilled across the deck as Luffy and Robin emerged from the observation room to join their crew under the star-filled sky. Frankie had already set their course, not back to their established base, but forward into the new world, where greater challenges and discoveries awaited. The most dangerous sea on the planet, where only the strongest survived. To freedom. Luffy toasted, raising his mug high as the crew gathered around him. To truth. Robin added. To adventure, the others chorused. As dawn broke on the horizon, the Liberty Dawn sailed toward the rising sun, carrying with it the hopes of countless oppressed people across the world. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, admirals to face, Yonko to confront, secrets to uncover, but for the first time, they weren't fighting alone. In Marine headquarters, 3 admirals stood before Fleet Admiral Sengoku, delivering their reports on the Sabaody incident. Straw Hat has grown beyond our expectations, Akiji concluded. The training we provided has been synthesized into something formidable. He should have been eliminated years ago, Akainu growled. I warned you all that compassion toward the boy would backfire. And yet, Kizaru mused, one must appreciate the irony. We trained him to embody justice, and now he fights for his own vision of it against us. A vision that threatens the very foundation of world order, Sengoku replied sternly. This revolutionary alliance he's helping forge could destabilize everything we've built. Or perhaps, Akiji suggested quietly, it could force needed reforms from within. The room fell silent at the implied criticism. Even Akainu seemed momentarily taken aback. Are you sympathizing with revolutionaries, Kuzan? Sengoku asked dangerously. I'm suggesting that when a system is challenged, it should examine why, not just crush the challengers. Akiji met the Fleet Admiral's gaze steadily. Straw Hat was once our student. We taught him to question, to analyze, to seek justice. Can we truly claim surprise when he turns those same skills against practices he deems unjust? The tension in the room was palpable. Your sentimentality is noted, Admiral Akiji, Sengoku finally said. And overruled. The official response to yesterday's events will be unequivocal. All participants in the Revolutionary Summit are declared enemies of the world government. Bounties will be increased. Monkey D. Luffy is now officially designated our highest priority target. Akainu nodded in satisfaction, while Kizaru simply shrugged. Akiji's expression remained neutral, but something shifted behind his eyes, a decision forming, though none present could guess its nature. As the meeting concluded and the admirals departed, each carried with them a different perspective on their former student. For Akainu, Luffy represented the ultimate betrayal, a weapon they had forged turned against its creators. For Kizaru, an interesting experiment with unexpected results. And for Akiji, perhaps, a catalyst for his own growing doubts about the system he served. Miles away, oblivious to these deliberations, Luffy stood at the bow of the Liberty Dawn, the wind tousling his hair beneath his treasured straw hat. The lessons of ice, magma, and light had shaped him, but never defined him. His path now was entirely his own, the Admiral of Freedom, sailing toward revolution. Robin joined him, her hand finding his as they gazed toward the horizon. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Leaving the path they laid out for you?" Luffy's answer came without hesitation, his grin wide and genuine beneath the brim of his straw hat. "Never. Some dreams are worth any price." The Liberty Dawn sailed on, carrying not just a crew but an idea, that freedom, once tasted, could never be forgotten. And that even those trained to uphold a flawed system could become its most effective challengers. Behind them, dawn broke fully over the endless sea, illuminating a world on the cusp of profound change. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.